Hello, East Hampton Town Board. We are live streaming and being recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, LTV. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the East Hampton Town Board work session of Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. Carol, if you could please read the roll call.
Councilmember Flake.
Present.
Councilmember
Present.
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 Present. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for joining us today. We are going to open with public portion, and we ask you to kindly keep your comments to 3 minutes. And then we have 6 topics today. We're going to start with Jeannie Carrozza giving us an overview of bids. Then our town administrator and budget officer, Becky Hansen, is going to review the 2025 draft capital plan. We had looked at that the end of last month and looked to make some revisions. We also have a presentation by 3 department heads, well, actually 2 department heads and a town council member for community development, our 2024 accomplishments and 2025 goals. Tina LaGuarena is going to present on the planning department. Eric Shantz is unable to be here today, so Ian Calder-Piedmont is going to pitch hit and do the housing and community development portion. And then Joe Palermo, our chief building inspector, will discuss the building department. Then Ian is going to give a presentation on affordable multiple residence recommendation from the housing office. We're going to have an after hearing discussion on 66 Wainscott Main Street, and that will be led by John Jilnicki, our assistant town attorney. And then Jake Turner, who is sitting in for Rob today, and we appreciate you being here, Jake, is going to give a presentation on a code amendment to the Bureau of Administrative Adjudication. That'll be followed by liaison reports and resolutions. So we are going to open up with public portion, and right now we have 1 person signed up. Welcome, Hersey. Please step up to the podium. Thank you for being here this morning.
Good morning, Supervisor Burke Gonzalez and members of the Town Board. I'm Hersey Egginton, Chair of the Wainscott Citizens Advisory Committee. I spoke at the work session on February 18th in support of the traffic safety recommendations developed by the CAC that Deputy Supervisor Rogers subsequently presented to the board at that meeting. Several farmers who still cultivate the land in Wainscott also spoke during the public portion of the meeting. They pointed out that their farm equipment would have trouble negotiating the roads if stop signs were added, especially at the intersection of Wainscott Main Street and Wainscott Hollow Road, where the Wainscott School is located, and in the westbound direction at the corner of Beach Lane and Wainscott Main Street. They did not, however, express any objection to a stop sign and crosswalk on the eastbound side of Wainscott Main Street and Beach Lane, nor did they speak against the recommendations for stop signs at the intersections of Wainscott Stone Road and Sayers Path, or Wainscott Northwest Road and Wainscott Stone Road. While they and Police Chief Sarlo don't think that speeding in either direction along Wainscott Main Street is a year-round problem, I would suggest otherwise. And in the interest of pedestrian and bicycle safety, I don't see a strong rationale for doing nothing. The volume of traffic year-round dictates action, and the speed signs, whose data was referenced by Chief Sarlo, don't capture pressure points, such as the bend in the road going south on Sayers Path, where it meets Wainscott Stone Road. This is also a pedal to the metal point where cars going in the other direction accelerate to race north onto Wainscott Stone Road. Pedestrians walking south on the correct side of Wainscott Stone Road are at risk unless they step into the tick-infested right-of-way. I urge the town board to work with the CAC, the police, and highway departments to adopt a modified traffic safety plan for 3 of the intersections in Wainscott, leaving the Wainscott School intersection as is for the time being. And with my remaining time, I would also like the board to take the necessary steps to landmark the property at 66 Wainscott Main Street, in addition to the 2 structures on this historic, iconic property, which is the heart of Wainscott. I referenced the letter I sent on behalf of the CAC regarding this issue a week or so ago. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Hersey. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Gloria?
Good morning. Gloria Frazee from East Hampton. I'm speaking in advance of the affordable housing, which is so important, and also in advance of the meeting that is going to be on Thursday evening about housing size limits. I'll reference Joni Mitchell, who wrote it so eloquently. I won't sing it. They paved paradise and put up a parking lot with a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? I've been fortunate in my career before I moved out here full-time to travel around to winemaking regions around the world as part of my job, interviewing winemakers. And I'd always ask them, what makes your wine so good? Because I usually think of East Hampton as being a fabulous space, a fabulous bottle of wine. And they all said, well, it's very easy. It comes down to 3 Gs: grapes, ground, and guy or gal. You need good grapes, you need good ground, and you need people who are stewards of their land, taking care of everything, because they know that it's all connected. You can't have a great bottle of wine, a great conversation over it with friends, if you don't have these 3 Gs. We're in danger of losing them here in East Hampton. We've got great people who get their hands dirty. Right here, we've got a beautiful example with the Change Hampton Garden. Rewild Long Island has installed already 3 pollinator gardens in East Hampton. We've got another 3 that just got grants. So there'll be a total of 6 community gardens here. And so that's people, guy or gal. Grapes, it's our natural resource, all of the pollinator gardens, all the ways that we're taking care of our natural resources. And ground is something we don't really pay attention to because we don't see it so much. We look out here and we see the garden waiting to bloom in the spring. We look out in front of people's homes and there are hedges and bushes and whatever. We see the various landscapes around us, but we don't look to see what's in the ground. As we cover more and more of that ground with our homes, with our parking lots, with our boutiques, we are destroying the life that's in the ground that we all interact with, that sustains us. If you don't have healthy ground, you don't have healthy vegetables, you don't have healthy people. We're all connected. We are caretakers of our community, of our ground, of our families, of our health. They're all interconnected, and what we do keeps that system going. And I hope to raise a glass of wine with everyone here and celebrate that we are really moving ahead and taking care of our community, our grapes, and our ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Is there anyone else that wants to address the board? Come on up. Welcome.
Hello, good morning, supervisor, members of the town board. My name is Sarah Kautz. I am principal and founder of Sarah Kautz Consulting, a cultural and historic resources firm who is working with Wainscott Heritage Project to update the survey for the Wainscott Historic District, which was last done in 1980. So I just wanted to, because I missed the public hearing for the 66 Wainscott Main Street, I just wanted to echo what my colleagues at Preservation Long Island and Mr. Zach Studenroth concluded, that the entirety of the site should be landmarked. That includes the land. I noticed that since that, so I noticed that the resolution for the designation includes 2 of the buildings, and then there's one smaller outbuilding that has since come to light that it was moved from Further Lane by the Osbornes in about the mid-20th century. It was probably used by farm workers. And when it was moved to the Osborne farm, it was used as a playhouse for children. So those are 2 groups that usually don't get a lot of attention in historic narratives, children and farm laborers. So to designate that would be very important because it provides a context for 20th century people who are usually overlooked in historic narratives. And that's very important to keep those 2 groups visible and in the story. Also, I wanted to mention that the landmark ordinance for the town does enable the town to designate whole lots. Let's see if I have it. Oh, yeah. So part of the update is to take the significance into the last 50 years, so up into the 70s. So this includes that whole area of the early 20th century and mid 20th century potato farming and the resorting kind of a country house estate era. So the Georgica era leading into suburban development today. So this property not only has ties all the way back 400 years to the very beginning of the colonial settlement around Wainscott Pond, but all the way right up to the transition into the suburban landscape that we see today. So all of those elements are there in that landscape. And it is essential to make sure we are connecting the open space, which is fields, yards. I just wanted to read this. This is from the designation of historic landmarks and historic districts. Section A, historic landmarks. The town may, by local law, designate an individual lot and any buildings or structures thereon as a historic landmark or as a special historic landmark if the property, so one of the criteria is possesses special character or historic or aesthetic interest or value as part of cultural, political, economic, or social history of the town. B is identified with historic personages, so jam-packed of decades worth of Osbornes and other folks important to local history. And then E, because of the unique location or singular physical characteristic, represents an established and familiar visible feature of its neighborhood. So I think those are just 3 where this property certainly meets those criteria. And if it meets those criteria, I think it should be designated in accordance with that, because these are also criteria that are taken into consideration for the state and national register of historic places. And this property certainly merits significance and integrity based on the state and national register criteria.
Thank you.
And one other thing I wanted to say, landmarking is not freezing things in amber. Landmarking is making sure we have a controlled process when we change a landscape or a property. It's not stopping any kind of change at all. It's making sure we're carefully thinking about the change that we want to make. So if the town, and I really encourage you to landmark the entire lot, if you do that, you can still change it. But it just needs a longer process of review where you are thinking more carefully about what those changes are and what the impacts might be to make sure you protect the integrity of that resource for the people of the town.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Jim? Welcome, Jim.
Morning.
Good morning.
I don't speak really well in front of people, so I'm going to do my best here, but
Just turn the mic up.
up
Yeah,
to my mouth
beautiful.
or my nose. Anyway,
You're doing great.
What I'm here for is I wanted to thank the board for a resolution you're going to pass later, an agreement that we made with the union for maternity and paternity leave with pay for people who are starting families. But I wanted to say more than a lot of the membership doesn't even know about it yet because I didn't want to spoil anything. We're having our membership meeting next week. But Becky said that you're going to be putting out flyers for this after. But I wanted to say thank you, but also acknowledge that it speaks a lot of respect. The fact that I can come into your office and we can have nice chats and you can say, what can I do for you, is a really big deal that I've been echoing to everybody else to try to get them to understand where we are with our relationship with the membership and the board. That you're invested in our families, and a lot of our families are very invested in this job. A lot of us take the job home with us. There's enough work that demands that, and it's just great to have this relationship with the board, and for it to be unanimous. I wanted to thank you for that, and thank you from the membership. And have a good day.
Jim, can I just ask you,
Sure.
since, and you're a great speaker.
Thanks.
Just to say your name and what union you're talking about so folks understand.
Sure, James Bennett, and I'm the president of the CSEA for our local unit, 8330. And you made some people happy. There's particular people that are going to use that right away. But it also helps, though, for what we were talking about with recruit and retain. Mm-hmm. You know, it makes it more appealing for someone who wants to build a family on this place. I think it should be known that this is a career. With how many years you have to put in here to get a retirement, and it's not a huge retirement, but it's a career, not just a job. It's not, just a pass-by thing. It's an investment. You're investing in us, and we're investing in a career. These folks that are in Tier 6, some people have to be here well over 30 years to get a retirement. That's a long time to work somewhere, and that's raising a family. On this career. So that's the way I look at this job, as a career, and some folks that are with me on that, and that's why we got to make it better. And this is a great little launching pad for saying that you're invested in families, and we got to get back to raising families here, so they're your next workers, and things like that. It's hard enough to live here without your help. So I'm grateful. The unit's grateful, and I really appreciate all of you for
Thank you, Jim. Can you share with us how long you've been with the town?
27 years. I've been here since '98.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
You guys have a good day.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, is there anyone else here that would like to address the board? Jason, is there anyone on the line?
Yes, we have 5 callers as of now. I'll unmute the first.
Okay.
Good morning, Supervisor. Hi, Supervisor Burke Gonzalez, members of the town board, fellow residents. This is Pablo Spiller. I'm a member of the Wainscott CAC subcommittee on traffic safety, who helped prepare the recommendations that Deputy Supervisor Rogers presented to you last week on our behalf. I'm calling today to comment on some of the issues raised a couple of weeks ago by Police Chief Sarlo and some other residents concerning the proposed stop signs along the 2 busy streets in Wainscott, Wainscott Stone Road and Westcott, Maine. Chief Sarlo in particular seemed to suggest that speed is not a problem in either speed. Now, as the material in Deputy Supervisor Rogers shows, during the summer, which by the way is the only time that the speed monitors work, as they are taken off for some good reason during the fall and spring, more than 70% of the traffic in Westcott Stone Road was above the speed limit, and that was during the whole summer, and also at all times of the day, including nights. And as it also presented in the material. The peak time now it goes from 9 in the morning to 7 in the evening. So it is at all times that there is a lot of traffic and that they are speeding. Now, for those of us who live in the neighborhood and use the street, 7% of traffic above the speed limit in a narrow street with no sidewalks is serious danger. And while we have been lucky so far that there has been no accidents, the combination of high volume of traffic and high speeds at most of the times of the day is really a recipe for disaster. And we don't want to have a situation like we had in Town Lane, that a tragic accident triggered action. We need to move now and do something to calm the traffic. And the proposal that was presented to you by the Wainscott CHC is a small, but I believe is a significant step towards providing some measure of peace of mind to our neighborhood. I sincerely hope that you will respond to Wainscott's needs and works towards implementing most of, if not all of, the Wainscott CHC recommendation. And I also want to support what the lady consultant who was talking on 66 Wainscott Main. It's a very important for us property in, and it's really the heart of Wainscott, as Percy said. Many thanks, all of you.
Thank you, Pablo.
Okay. Unmuting the next caller. Let's make sure I have this all in order.
Thank you, Jason.
One moment. Okay. Hello, caller ending 0709. You're on the air.
Oh, wonderful. Good morning. Good morning, Town Board. This is Esperanza Leon calling from Wainscott. A little bit of multitasking today. I wish I could be there in person. I am about to head down to the Wainscott Chapel, and I was hoping to be in front of that wonderful piece of property I'm calling about 66 Wainscott Main Street. I'm speaking as the president of Wainscott Heritage Project, but in part also simply as a resident of Wainscott. I echo everything that Sarah Couts said earlier, and I just would like, I'm looking forward actually to hearing John Jelnicki's presentation. I've read the memo. I would like to ask that you reconsider the designation of the structures to include the third structure as well as the land. In the name alone, John Osborne Homestead, that indicates a piece of land. There's no homestead with just a farmhouse. And as we've said before, the farm goes with the farmhouse. And as Sarah indicated, there's nothing truly restrictive about the historic code. It is in your hands, in fact, and with public input to craft the guidelines that would better plan for the preservation of that property in all its aspects, and in particular its historic character. So I hope that you will take that into consideration, and again, I look forward to listening to the discussion later on. And please, if you would, please just wait on the voting of this. It needs a little more thought. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Esperanza.
Okay, and I shall unmute the next caller. Let's get them up and running. Hello, 7888. You are on the air.
Good morning, Supervisor and members of the Town Board. This is Susan Macy. I'm a full-time resident of Wainscott, and thank you for allowing me to speak about the resolution to only grant historic designation to two of the structures at 66 Wainscott Main Street, but not the land, formerly the John Osborne Homestead. Really, Esperanza and Sarah have pretty much covered what I had planned to say. I just want to say that I hope that you will either table the discussion. I feel like I'm not really sure when you say you keep your options open, exactly what that means. I hope it's nothing like, paved trails or a playground, but I just don't know because as far as I know, the public has not been privy to your vision of what you see happening on the land. So I just ask that you please consider giving historic designation to the entire property and the 3 structures at 66 Wainscott Main Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Unmuting the next caller. So I was just adjusting my notes.
Great.
Hello, caller 4221. You are on the air.
Thank you, LTV. Good morning, Town Board. It's Jane Mearing, resident of Amagansett, speaking this morning. Also as a member of the Wainscott Heritage Project Board and also as an individual concerned resident of the town, offering some comments relative to your work session later in the meeting regarding 66 Wainscott Main Street. I did speak at the November public hearing, at which point you will recall I endorsed and advocated for the historic designation of all 3 structures on the property, as they were well described and documented as having historic and preservation value. I imagine you'll also recall that I, along with fellow WHP board members, made clear case urging the board to, as it seemed to originally intend, to formally put a historic designation over the entire parcel, much has been done in recent years on other CPF-acquired properties. So I am disappointed to see the somewhat limited scope of the draft resolution in front of you today. I am really struck, though, by the first whereas in the reso, which states, whereas the town board, considering all the information provided as any and all comments presented at the time of the hearing, believes the designation of the John Osborne Homestead property as a town historic landmark is appropriate. So if you believe that designation of the property parcel is indeed appropriate, then I'm a bit baffled why you're not moving forward with that as part of the resolution today. I have, of course, read Mr. Chilnicki's memo. I respect it. I'm happy to see that the town did that. I know that you're invested in this, and my 3 minutes restrict my ability to comment or question it in depth. But in short, there is a discussion about things that might be considered or done on the property, but I have not really seen the persuasive legal precedent or case law that makes a definitive case against designating the parcel. And in fact, Mr. Chilnicki concludes, quote, if the desire is to include the real property in the designation, it would be prudent to carve out certain exceptions in order to allow above improvements to be made in the future. So a designation can be made without shutting down legitimate site-compatible uses or even, to some extent, structures. If this board feels that it wants to deny legitimate historic designation to, quote, leave its options open to do things on the site that are not entirely consistent with the historical patterns, and it doesn't protect the actual vista to the very fullest extent, that strikes us as somewhat problematic. Spending $56 million to preserve and protect a parcel and then not doing everything in your codified power to actually preserve and protect that parcel as strongly as possible in perpetuity seems like a suboptimal use of those taxpayer funds. I'm sorry if I sound a bit salty as I say this. The reason people for decades have cherished this spot, and the reason that folks literally jumped up and down and cheered and celebrated when you announced this purchase, is because of how they feel about the vista, and they want to protect it and not obliterate it. And I think people believe the CPF would mean that. So my ask, I think it's shared, is that you go ahead and put the designation on 2 structures, but make the resolution clear that a decision about local landmark designation for the whole parcel is not being prohibited or denied and remains a viable option for further consideration and expertise. And I just want to say one other thing, because I like when people understand the process of the board. I very much appreciate that this board is going to have a thoughtful post-hearing work session to get into their mindset and how they feel in public and transparent. So I never want my opinions to make it seem like I don't appreciate the work that this board does and your deliberation and consideration. And I'll see you on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay, moving on to the next caller. Let's see. We had one person drop out, and then a few more people came right in. So 7487, you are on the air.
Hi, this is Pam Mahoney from Wainscott, and I would like to strongly recommend that there be that you designate the entire property at 66 Main Street, Wainscott, as a historic landmark. The property, the land, and all structures on it. It's such an iconic piece, and I think it's critical that the entire property be designated as a historic landmark. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Okay, and unmuting the next caller. Hello, 0299. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Town Board. This is Carolyn Logan Gluck calling. I'm a Wainscott resident and a member of the Wainscott Heritage Project Board. I'm calling in regarding to the matter to do with 66 Wainscott Main Street and asking you to not approve the resolution as it has been written today, but to consider amending it so that there is the possibility to landmark the property, not just the two structures, the property and all existing structures, and designating them as historic. My predecessors who've spoken earlier today have highlighted the main reasons, but I would just point out that, in my view, the memo written by Mr. Jelnicki does not support the resolution as written right now, and he has indicated you a path forward, noting that designating real property, if the desire is to include the real property in the designation, and I think that you've heard many people indicate their desire for this, it would be prudent to carve out certain exceptions in order to allow the above improvements to be made in the future. So I urge you to consider revising the resolution accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
And we have one more caller who has not spoken yet. Unmuting now. Caller ending 3472, you are on the air.
Thank you. Hello, Town Board members. This is Bruce Wayne Solomon from 14 Hedges Lane in Wainscott. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are.
Okay, terrific. Great. I'm going to throw a little bit of heart into this one because as a runner and a cyclist who has passed that 66 Main Street parcel on many a run and many a ride, I can only tell you that from the heart, when I pass that area, my heart flutters. I begin to feel that there is a real sense of community within, and that something like that just makes my insides sing. And I cannot imagine anybody that has gone past there who looks at that vista, who sees what I see, can't think and see this the same way I do about that. It is a cherished vista of all of the Hamptons, not just Wainscott. So, why do so many people want to travel down Main Street and see that vista when they are coming home or leaving, what have you? So what I would like to just do is just to encourage the voices that have the power here to really consider what it is that we're saving. And I would like to add my voice to the other speakers to have this parcel designated as a historic preservation along with the 3 structures. I'm not sure why the 3rd one was left out. That has probably just as much importance, if not more, than some of the other structures that are on the lot there. So we went into this advocating for, and the community advocated for this parcel to remain as is into perpetuity, not cut up and decided upon maybe in the future, maybe 5 years from now we'll do something, maybe the farmer's going to farm this, what have you, all these things that I've been hearing thrown out there. We want it preserved the way it is as we see it now. And thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay.
Jason?
We have, I'm just double checking my numbers because there's a few people still stayed on the line. As far as I can see, yes, all parties on the line have spoken.
Okay, so I'll go back to the main meeting room. Is there anyone here that would like to address the board? Okay, so we're going to move on to topics. And first up, we have Jeannie Carrozza, our senior purchasing agent. Welcome, Jeannie.
Thank you. Before I start with my bids and notices, I just want to echo what Jim Bennett was saying about the resolution on for today for the parental leave. We fully support it, and I want to thank you.
And when you say we, you're talking about?
The Department Head Association. Okay.
Thank you, Jeannie.
You're welcome. Okay, the first bid to accept is the printing of miscellaneous forms. TSG Direct is the apparent low bidder for that one. The next is Springs Park Restoration Test Plot. Jackson Dodds and Company is the apparent low bidder in the amount of $23,112. A couple of notices. The first is for 19 Joshua Edwards Court. That's the roof and door replacement, and that is a affordable housing, affordable home for prospective resident. And next is food service and kitchenware items. And lastly, there's also a resolution on for the joint municipal bidding with Eastern Suffolk BOCES. They act as the lead agency for several bids that the town uses for services and commodities. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have questions for Jeannie? Thanks, Jeannie.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Becky Hansen, our town administrator and budget officer, to lead the discussion on the draft 2025 capital plan. Welcome, Becky.
Good morning. Let me get my glasses here, my old age.
You sound like David.
Right.
Giant writing.
I know. I have 14 font on my page.
Yeah.
Good morning, let's say that. Yeah. Good morning, Supervisor, members of the Town Council. I'm here to present a second draft of the 2025 capital plan. It's been an update since the version that was presented at the February 18th meeting. So a brief review for the public's benefit. A capital plan is an outline of proposed projects for purposes that include, but not limited to, physical improvements, new construction, reconstruction or upgrades to municipal facilities, acquisition of vehicles or apparatus to be used by town employees, and the acquisition of land. The town adopts annually a 3-year plan, and during the plan formulation process, various department heads are engaged to get a better understanding of their requests and their priority. So, question, what's changed since the last version? The draft outlines a total cost now of $12,598,400. This is $81,000 less than the plan that was presented on February 18th. Compared to the 2024 adopted plan, it's $6,317,700 less than the 2024 plan. The difference from the amount of retired debt to new debt that would be issued from the first presentation has increased to $727,600. The plan still proposes to use a conservative amount of fund balance from each of the 4 major funds, a total of just over $1.2 million, which is less than 2.5% of your total unassigned fund balance from the year end of 2023. So just to go into some of the specifics of what's changed from the initial presentation, $25,000 was added for digitizing town records as we determine the next steps on those programs. Jeannie Carozza and I will be doing an assessment with the various departments who have not participated in the program or those that have to see where the future is with that program. We are reallocating or removing $50,000 for ADA improvements as the reserve fund that we still have set up has over $200,000 available to all of our various departments. We are reallocating the storage facility for communications to year 2026. Under Marine Patrol Harbor Master, a vehicle that was slated for 2026 was moved to 2025 for a total of 2 vehicles for that department. And additional funding was added for work for the Sammy's Beach bulkhead. Although it's not noted in the plan as we await guidance from New York State, we will be seeking a grant for either that project or the Westlake project. We feel that there might be funding available under the state's CFA or the Consolidated Funding Application Program, and usually that's announced in May or June of this year. There is a slight decrease for the Highway Department for purchasing old vehicles. Any vehicle purchase that was proposed, namely pickup trucks, were all converted to hybrid purchases instead of electric. And in talking with Ricky Talmadge, who is one of the town's fleet service managers, the amounts that have come in right now for one of those trucks is just under $60,000. So each vehicle has been budgeted at $60,000. An excavator purchase was removed from the Parks Department as per the department head, Steve O'Brien. It was no longer needed to be funded. That was $50,000. There is an increase under the police department for additional purchase of ballistic vests, not just for the ESU team, which was proposed in the initial plan, but also for officers department-wide. This is an annual replacement that just the chief just failed to submit the first time around because obviously vests have an expiration date on them. So they do need to be replaced, routinely. So there also is additional money for members of the ESU team. So that is an increase in the police department. And also $50,000 has been added to begin the process to upgrade the generator at the Montauk Playhouse. Again, that being a site location as a shelter, we believe that to actually make the purchase, the town will be eligible for a grant for the purchase of it, but we have included funding for at least the engineering part of it. So James Pincott, our capital projects manager, is actively working on getting between the contractor that's there now and what the needs is going to be future for the building so that we can make sure that we have the right facilities there. If there are no additions after today's work session discussion, the board can adopt the plan at your meeting this Thursday, which would really give us a head start on starting to adopt debt authorizing resolutions, which we could start probably as early as the first April meeting, and also a resolution that you adopt annually to appropriate fund balance to fund those projects. And I just want to clarify something that maybe for some members of the public, this might seem like a wish list or desires of the town board, but really a capital plan is a sign the town is being proactive in establishing its infrastructure priorities, both short and long term. And each project on this list has been fully vetted and verified through the department heads as really necessities. And it's really important that the town maintains this cycle of upgrading and updating, whether it's a building, whether it's computers, it's vehicles, just so that you're providing the best available, not only for your town employees, but also the residents.
Thank you, Becky.
So I don't know if there are any questions or you guys have anything to discuss?
Just one question, which I don't know if you've done the calculation, but we've kind of had a discussion previously about just the age of the capital we're retiring. So it's at 11 million, but this is capital that's 20 years old. 11 million 20 years ago is a lot more than 11 million today. So how are we adjusting our capital investments for inflation?
Well, I mean, that's adjusted each year. I mean, the town does a debt sale each year. So any old debt is also, at the same time you're issuing new debt, is rolling into new and current financing. So it's not the same $11 million that was borrowed 20 years ago.
Right. But theoretically, it's kind of looking at like 11 million of projects were done X number of years ago. You know, if we're not adjusting it for inflation as we go, are we putting enough money into our infrastructure investments?
Well, again, I mean, you have to take into account also that the town has a majority over probably the last decade really stuck to a policy, and it's really a best practice to not incur more debt than you're retiring in any fiscal year. So using that really as your benchmark, if you're going to bring in the inflation component to it, I mean, either you're going to stick to retiring. I mean, that number is there. It's a hard number. We're retiring, just over $11 million in debt this year. I don't know how else you make that adjustment, because then we're issuing the, lower amount of that debt. So again, without a change in that policy, issuing new versus retiring old, I don't know how that you could adjust.
Well, I think the way I interpret what you're saying,
I understand
Tom,
what you're saying.
that, $11 million 20 years ago went a lot further than $11 million goes today.
Totally.
Exactly.
And as Becky said, we have scrutinized and believe that the projects that are in this capital plan are necessary. I've always said that the budget, and whether you're talking about the operating budget or the capital budget, it's really a reflection of what we value as a community. It's what our priorities are. And we talked about this last time, is that there's a lot of infrastructure work that needs to be done. And we need, roofs, need to be replaced, as do HVAC systems. Vehicles have to be replaced. And we also have made a huge push for recreation. I mean, David's led on that. And, I had the Girl Scout troop from John Marshall here on Saturday. They're fourth graders. And, we were talking about, our recreational opportunities, and they were kind of surprised by all of the properties that the town owns, and beaches and whatnot. But, it needs investment. And while it is a tremendous rule of thumb to only take on what you retire, here we're going a bit over that, because these are all projects that we felt very strongly about that we needed to make. The only thing that, and I know, Tom, you had asked about the Amagansett Lighting District, and we talked about that. That's a special district, but the parking lot where we want to improve the lighting, those funds are already accounted for.
As far as I know, yes.
Right. And you had also brought up the Montauk generator, and we put money in for that. It's hard to know until we determine and engineer it what exactly we want, connected to the generator, what that cost would be. And hopefully we're going to find grant funding. I have been outreached by Congressman Lalota and Senator Schumer's office about grant funding being available there. We're going to be looking at this capital plan and seeing what kinds of applications we're going to make. The state, as Becky said, has funding opportunities we'll know more about in May and June. They're typically due at the end of July. But there was one request that was made that by our highway superintendent, Steve Lynch, regarding sanitation. And he had wanted to purchase a new trommel. And we had that in 2026. He had asked to move that into 2025. And we didn't make that move. And that's basically the only thing I recall that we after speaking to the department heads and hearing their the need for what's in their request, where that netted out. And I don't know how folks feel about that. That's the only
Sorry, by putting the trommel into 25 instead of 20. So the trommel amortizes itself over time. The trommel actually makes the town money through sanitation, as we know. It's probably one of the largest producers that we have, and it's very similar to what the town has done at, let's say, head of the harbor, which is one of the dock infrastructures. It was about $2 million. But if you amortize that over recreational slip spaces over 20 years, it pays for itself, maybe a little bit less, but town still provides the service. Knowing the age of that trommel, seeing it all the time, I would listen to what the department head and maybe the liaison.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, Steve did echo this earlier, which is that if it shuts down, we lose revenue.
Yeah.
And so it does quickly pay for itself. The other option is you don't put it in for this year and you get the repairs done, you're still going to incur the cost somewhere for those repairs, so that's really what you might have to balance against, the amortization piece. If there's a way to do it in this year's budget, I would really think it would be the prudent thing to do.
And by, I don't know if they're even available right now. I know the last, the Moorbark that we got, that was on site. So it still could be months till we have it. I know they've replaced the screens. The trauma went down last year, but also is very important to the composting efforts of the town and reducing the amount of yardage to stay within the DEC 10, I think it's the 1040 permit that we have on there. So the trauma is an important cog to that a lot of times gets overlooked because it's behind a pile of wood.
Yeah, I'm glad I was going to ask just to enumerate again what a trauma is for folks. So I think you just explained it, how important it is, the composting operation. And with what we're facing with the closure of the Brookhaven landfill, et cetera, anything we can get out of the stream and make money on is win-win-win. So I would support it being done in this budget as well, if possible.
I agree.
So in a couple of the things, I think there's a different, a lot of the PPUs for a lot of our bonds, 15 to 20 years. Is that correct, Becky? On a lot of our infrastructure needs, sometimes PPUs are 15, 20 years, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, it varies from year to year what your projects are.
To what the use, I'm sorry if my voice is not there. And also to what the usage they are. Don't forget, we're nearly 18 years, close to 18, 16 years out on a very financial issue for the town of East Hampton. So a lot of those, a lot of the semi-austerity that the town had to go through at that time, we now have to pay for the upkeep of some of those buildings that you couldn't spend money on then. Or if the debt service was low then, it was for a reason on there, and that we had to do that. I also like the practice of what some of our department heads are doing is by also requesting for engineering. You need the engineering to be able to apply for the grants. You just can't go in with a grant without necessarily the engineering because it makes it not as strong of an application to do so. So that's very important to have, and you can time that out within a capital budget cycle. Also, one of the practices is by putting money in for repairs instead of complete replacements, such as the aquaculture facility in Montauk run by John Barley Dunn. That roof blew off during the windstorms last week, blew off by a couple, a square is a 10 by 10. There's a couple squares that blew off of there. And so now we might have funding to replace that because the town can't go on roof, the town staff can't go on roofs, instead of a full roof replacement. So we're putting a pound of prevention into there and many of those. I think what the supervisor is also saying, as far as there's a 60% increase in the money that's going into our road surfacing and road construction, then too, you add that with some of the grant funding we get from the state, it allows us to keep turning over some of the roads as far as asphalting. And as we saw this year, our roads haven't taken a beating in a couple of years because of not as much heaving from the snow and the ice, but there is a lot of there's potholes there right now that they're actively addressing, but the long-term schedulized rollover and added added capital into it, the residents will see it, not just in their shocks and brakes, but also in the roadways then too.
And if I could jump on that. So last night, I was going to bring this up in my liaison report, but last night the East Hampton Sag Harbor CAC met, and on the agenda was potholes, and everybody was supposed to bring their list of where, the bad potholes are. Not that any of them potholes are ever good. And when we got around the table, it turns out that the highway department had addressed all of it before we even got to our meeting, and that they've been very proactive, and it was commented that this has been a really bad year for potholes. But I even had the Girl Scout leader, Amanda Frazier, was at our meeting, and she said she called the highway department for one on Springy Banks, and 3 days later it was filled. So folks I've been getting a lot of praise from the work that the highway department is doing to try to fix those potholes in a very timely fashion.
And I agree.
It's inexpensive if you're, somebody on a pothole down on a state road, it blew their tire and bent their rim because the pothole was so deep. And, you worry about injury.
So I completely agree with that because a pothole is a fix to it's a temporary fix. This is a capitalized fix over time. I also appreciate you, the town board, looking into the engineering for the playhouse and the generator. Tom is correct on that. Get that set. We're putting such an investment into that playhouse, the facility right now, the aging of that generator is a smart thing to do right now. So I look forward to continuing that. And Tom, continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, the more that center evolves, the more it's kind of this little benchmark of what a town community center can be. You have childcare in there with a public-private partnership. You have senior care in there with a public-private partnership. You have recreation and wellness in there. I think it's a really good model that we've got some finessing to do. And having it as the emergency center too with that generator is key. So
yeah, I think that's critical to have that a functioning modern generator as we move forward for emergency preparedness.
And also goes into, with this project, I know for the restoration of the second house, that was a multi-phased approach to an historical restoration of the historically designated property on there that was not CPF. So you actually had to put that in the cap budget over years of nearly $4 million. Many of the buildings, including ones that were going to be discussed today, don't have to go in the CapEx project because they're historically designated. And that might be some of the only reasons why you historically designate structures is because the funding comes out of a management and stewardship plan from the Community Preservation Fund. So individuals have to understand the difference in the CapEx and then also from the CPF stewardship plans there's a fine line to that designation and then allows the town to do more when you appropriately designate structures.
So if the board, if the collective agreement obviously is to move the trauma from 26 to 25, you're still under your threshold to issue less debt than what you're retiring in this year. So that's the good news.
All right, so let's make.
So if you're okay with that, I can make that change and we can put a resolution on for Thursday night with a copy of the new plan on the town website under the meetings and documents so people can see that change.
And do I recall that Steve Lynch also said the Trummel can go to auction? Like we're not going to.
No, he's going to trade it in.
Trade it.
Yeah, be part of trade-in.
So
yeah.
there is value. We're going to give value
have
that
to
way.
issue the full debt, and then any trade-in on the debt that's issued, we would use that money towards paying down that debt. So it wouldn't go into the general revenue in the sanitation fund.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My only
go ahead.
Yeah, my only comment, and this is sort of, it deals with the 2026, so I know it's not imminent, but there's $250,000 in there for Brooks Park. And it ties into what Councilman Lease was talking about in terms of different funds. I do think that we should make a real effort to use, that project, we'll see how it develops, but I think we should use CPF funds for the restoration. There's a 10% set aside each year, and I don't think we've always spent that. So I've worked with the Property Management Committee. I'll talk more in my liaison report about lining up projects to make sure we're taking advantage of funds that aren't, coming out of a capital plan or, general taxpayer funds. It's still a tax in its own way, but again, I just want to be thoughtful and fiscally responsible. So I think we might want to move that around depending on other CPF expenditures.
Again, if it's not that in the general sense that you're issuing debt or pulling from, the A fund balance to pay for it, and it is going to be through CPF, you can really make that decision and access that funding really at any time. We just have more timelines in place when we're issuing debt and have to appropriate fund balance for what's contained in the plan. And just because something, and I think this is a misconception too, just because something is not on these 5 pieces of paper doesn't mean, again, just like the operating budget, it's a fluid document. If something does come up, obviously during the year and something else, needs to be replaced, or we have a major storm and there's some other infrastructure reconstruction that needs to be done. I mean, again, the town is in a really great financial position to have the ability to issue debt on the fly if you needed to, or again, appropriate temporarily from fund balance until the time that you issue any debt that may be needed. So.
Yeah, that said, I appreciate that you do try to make this a very realistic, capital plan and put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, great. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up, we have our department heads that are here to talk about community development, the 2024 accomplishments and 2025 goals. And first up, we have our planning director, Tina Lagaran. Welcome, Tina. I can still say good morning. I got a minute.
Thank you, Supervisor. Good morning, town board members. Tina Lagaran from the Planning Department. This will be a brief discussion of the Planning Department's 2024 accomplishments and 2025 goals. So on the first slide for planning, it's up. You just need the next slide.
Okay, thanks.
It's okay. There you go. Thank you, Patrick. To introduce the planning department to all, I tried to think of one single image that could sum us up, but I couldn't. We provide such a diverse array of tasks for the town. I juxtapose these images to attempt to convey our key role in assisting the town efforts to balance planning and development with natural resource protection and neighborhood character. So on the next slide, you will see our current formal mission statement, which is on the website. This further drills down on the tasks that we perform and expresses many of our core duties. We are charged with providing professional planning and technical services to the town board, town departments, appointed boards for application review, and generally supporting planning initiatives throughout the town and beyond. The next slide looks at the 2024 accomplishments I'll start to drill down on. One of the first things I worked on when I was acting director at the end of last year was to change the metrics we used to measure the department's work efforts. Prior to this year, we had tracked about 4 categories of work, totaling up to about 500 actions associated with our application workflow in 2023. But totaling the ones here showing our 2024 efforts and just the first 7 rows that have to do directly with applications, that number is over 2,100 application actions. These numbers more closely align with the breadth of the work that we do and demonstrate the huge volume of work that we produce. We processed almost 800 applications. Each of those includes a complex set of steps, and in almost every case requires analysis of site history, complicated code provisions, and understanding intricate and sensitive environmental and neighborhood conditions. We also do a lot of site work. We delineated almost 230 wetlands and inspected 140 sites for board preconditions related to building permits and COs. And those numbers don't include the initial inspections we do for sites or for special projects. Through all of these tasks, we strive to be thorough, timely, and consistent in our approaches. And we have just a small team, so it's 4 administrative staff and 7 technical staff members, including myself. So with just that handful of folks, these numbers are huge, and obviously we're all working very hard to get them done. The next slide continues on some 2024 accomplishments. As if the thousands of reports weren't enough, we also supported a wide array of planning initiatives. And there's too many individual ones to note, but I'll highlight some that we played key roles in, one of which was the zoning code committee, and we contributed to the development of changes for the purposes of zoning, changes to the accessory structure code, and changes to the GFA, working closely with Councilmember Rogers. Major planning studies included the wireless master plan, which was completed early in 2024, the Springs corridor study and the Wayne-Scott implementation plan, where detailed recommendations were presented to the town board last year. We also completed in-depth secret reviews for major town initiatives associated with the airport operational changes in the senior center. We worked on environmentally focused projects, including the Montauk Inlet dredging and the Ditch Plains dune restoration efforts. And through all of this, we're frequent collaborators with other town departments, the town board, the town committees on planning issues whenever they arise. For this year, in 2025, our goals, we imagine being just as busy with the applications while continuing to expand our repertoire of planning projects. One of the new major projects we've currently been working on is migrating our 32 paper-based applications into an online environment called OpenGov. I know you're all very familiar with this. It's been a huge commitment to translate our paper process to an online environment, and we're striving to harness the efficiencies that the online environment has to offer. And we're working to complete the migration in early 2025. We're also hoping to work with IT to enhance public access to basic data that can help folks better understand and prepare for environmental conditions on their property associated with wetlands. Also, our contributions to major planning initiatives will continue. The zoning code change discussion we expect to progress with review of natural resource special permit standards. We are continuing to work on the Springs and Wayne-Scott studies to get priority initiatives ready for implementation. And we're excited to start work on the Montauk Coastal Resiliency Planning effort, which is the $600,000 grant we got several years ago to study policy and zoning responses to climate change, sea level rise, and erosion. Finally, I'll just sum up that we do want to focus on filling staffing vacancies. We do have a number of vacancies in the department, and filling those will be a priority so we can get all this very important work accomplished. And with that, I'll thank you for your time.
Well, let's just see if anyone has questions first. Does anyone have questions for Tina? Comments?
Oh, go ahead, Tom. Sorry, yeah, one thing I brought up last meeting too. It's like, is there a way to visualize what the planning department's working on at a time, like an active pipeline?
But I'm sorry, what was that last question?
Is there an active pipeline that we can visualize what the planning department is currently working on, just kind of to see the workflow of where different projects are?
Yes, we maintain tracking sheets of all of our applications, what's coming in, what's coming out. So we do have that. When there's OpenGov, I think it'll be a little bit more of a crisper system, at least for the application piece. And then we also have a list of projects, who's assigned. And so, I mean, I could share those.
Yeah,
with
that'd be just helpful.
They're not pretty, but
okay.
I will be warned.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to drill down on a couple of your numbers so folks understand. How many applications types are there in the planning department that you process?
Right, so we have 32 different application forms and types currently, but there's a few of those categories that are the bulk of the work, which really is the ZBA, variance and NRSP, the planning board site plans and subdivisions, and then the ARB really does have a big mix of what they get: signs, changes to commercial, ag overlays.
So basically, any land use project in most ways comes 99% of the time, if not more, comes before the planning department in one way or another.
Yeah, the list of triggers for when approval from one of the appointed boards is huge, right? So really any disturbance on commercial properties can trigger site plan. It is an expansive list of things that we get involved in.
And also just one more thing, of course, the applications and processing the applications and time of processing the applications, and it's such a vast amount, is also a partnership with the applicant, correct? In terms of what you need by code to be able, from an application, to be able to deem it complete and then send it to the boards.
Absolutely. One of the key drivers of the overall time it takes to get an application through the process is the completeness of the information that we receive. We'll often have to ask for the same bit of information several times before it's really complete enough for us to act on. And at each stage in the process, we're tracking how long it takes us to respond. So with our internal tracking sheets, we see, okay, this is how many months it takes to do this or that. And we can then know how long it takes between submissions, and the applicants also take, time to produce the information requested. So there's drivers for the length of the overall, procedure time on both sides.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages of OpenGov coming in is that an application will not be able to be submitted until it's complete.
Yes, well,
hopefully that'll take some of the burden off of you folks.
Exactly. So the way we're configuring the system is that for each different application type, the list of required documents will be there, and they will not be able to submit it if they don't have all those boxes checked with a correlating upload. So that will at least relieve our duty to check for the presence of the item. A lot of times things are incomplete or inconsistent, they'll have the structures on there, but not all of them. And they'll have some calculations on one plan that don't match another. And, our review catches all that, and that will go back as incomplete too, because we can't act on inaccurate information. So there will still be a lot of work we're doing, but at least that first step, it will make sure that it's consistent and present.
Yeah, I think one thing to remember with OpenGov is your output is only as good as your input. So if incorrect documents are uploaded, et cetera, then you're still going
to have to go back again. But hopefully, I see that alleviating concerns of processing time. But I also wanted to have folks understand what are the aspects of processing time that hold your department up as well.
Yeah. I mean, certainly if everything that came in was clear, consistent, and everything, appropriately labeled and put forth, like if the submission was perfect on the first time, the application review times would be drastically different than they are, for certain.
And I know we keep talking about OpenGov. We are going to have a presentation, I believe, Tom, it's going to be in April, right, from IT,
Yeah.
where we can demonstrate how OpenGov will work for the departments.
Great.
Tina, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Joe Palermo, our Chief Building Inspector and the Department Head for the Building Department. Welcome, Joe.
Good afternoon, everyone. Joe Palermo, Chief Building Inspector. Building Department, very busy department, and
sorry, I figured it was. I know. I skipped the middle one. We'll have Ian do that.
Building Department, a lot of moving parts, very busy department. Mission statement, really strive to serve our residents, homeowners, applicants in a respectable, professional manner. The main thing here is seeking voluntary compliance. We are building inspectors, code enforcement offices, but we do try to separate ourselves from the code enforcement end and work on the compliance end. So some of our accomplishments in 2024, we were instrumental in adopting the new code, which went into effect January of 24, requiring updated CFOs upon the transfer of ownership. This helps the buyer, very important. Helps clean up old building permits. Some of the history, there's a lot of properties, a lot of old building cards, some old building permits, open, closed, never worked, never done. Helps us clean it up. Helps us legalize structures that maybe were built without the benefit of building permits. And most importantly, it helps us check on the health and safety of the properties. We also work.
Can I just ask, so you're almost 15 months into that, and
Right.
What has been, your experience and the feedback?
I think the thing that really stands out to me is when we first talked about this, there was a lot of skepticism with the public, real estate attorneys, et cetera. But as it went on, we really found that most people wanted to comply. And also a lot of attorneys, they make comments, they like it because it just helps clean up their transactions and everything's just cut and dry, black and white. So I think it's been pretty successful.
Right.
Another accomplishment, we have a new fee schedule that went into effect last May. I thought we were from the building, when you're taking a building permit, from start to finish, including all the inspections, the reviews, the CFO, I felt like we were severely undercharging for that. So we worked on that fee schedule, which has been successful. We helped, this is a moving target, but we really helped reduce the lead times on completed applications. And I think the new OpenGov is going to help receiving completed applications in. What kind of bogs us down a little bit is the incomplete applications and, applications getting stuck on hold and start and stop, et cetera. But it's always a moving target. Just to keep it in perspective, in 2024, we averaged about 140 building permits per month on the intake, all types, new builds, major renos, down to a shed or a patio or to legalize an item. But it averaged about 140 per month on the intake. Also, our department is represented on the new zoning committee. And actually our first round of code changes went into effect on March 1st. So now everything's stamped in from Monday going forward. these new codes will apply.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in here for a second. Zoning Code Committee is not so new anymore, but the time that your department, the data from your department and the time that you personally put in has really been the keystone of our work. Your recommendations and where you saw issues with the passcode was instrumental in bringing those amendments forward that went into effect on March 1st, and also the upcoming discussion and public hearing on GFA, and it was your department also that brought us the need to update the COOs so that we actually know what's on the property. Your department knows, and of course buyers know. So Joe's department, besides all of the other things that the department handles on a daily basis, also is a keystone of that committee.
Thank you. And some of our goals for the upcoming year, one of my goals is to maybe hire a senior building inspector to get in place to help delegate some of the management aspects, help with some of the building permits and oversight with the building inspectors. We are working on, and we're going to propose soon, changes to the rental registry as far as inspections go. It'll be impossible. It's a couple of thousand rental registries per year, I believe. It's impossible for us to do all those inspections. Right now, we currently have a self-checklist. So when the applicant puts it in, they'll go down and check, if they have a pool, level, how many bedrooms, et cetera. But we're proposing, like a lot of municipalities do, is they use a third-party inspector, like an architect or an engineer, somebody to actually go through and walk through. I think it would be a key to, especially with the health and safety involved, because we're not doing any of those inspections.
So make sure the pool has the proper fencing, gates.
Proper fencing, the pool gates are closing, you have the right alarms, door alarms, smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, the basics, the health and safety, which are really important. If somebody has a patio in the backyard, we'll catch up with it sooner or later, but that's not going to hurt anybody. But the health and safety aspects are really important. So having a third party looking at that, I think is key. Another goal, well, actually, it's the building inspectors, to have the building inspectors and the staff get code certified. The building inspectors, when they start out, they get certified, and every year there's so many hours they have to put in to keep up their certification. We also have admin staff who's code certified. We have a building permits examiner who will be starting his classes this month. It helps move the traffic along. If somebody's calling up, that code compliant person can then legally answer a question about a setback or about an alarm. When they're not code certified, we really can't do it. Then we have to wait for the building inspectors to be available. Another thing we did was actually one of our goals. We're actually looking forward to getting this OpenGov up and running, which I believe is supposed to take effect next week. That should, once we work out the kinks, I think it's going to make the town more efficient. With the building department, applications will be able to be submitted online. We have not only a building permit application, we have rental registries, septic registries. We do research, letters of billability. There's a lot of applications that can then come online. The fees can be also paid online. That'll be a lot, than taking in checks all day.
Be very happy customers.
That's going to be paid. Electronic submissions, like I said, the building permit, we'll get the plans, we'll be able to review them online. just what I mentioned before about complete building permit applications, when you're electronically submitting a building permit, there's a checklist that you go down. And if you reach a point, say you don't have a survey, and you can't click on or upload it, you're not going to be able to get past go. You have to wait until you get that. You're not going to be able to submit in a complete application. So that I think, for us, I think is one of the most important things. And other than that, thank you for your time and have a good day. Any questions?
No, I mean, I like you. I think I'm excited for the OpenGov rollout for your department specifically. I think it's going to really help your efficiency in that office. So
yeah, we're looking forward to it. We've been working on that for a long time, like over a year. So we're ready to roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe, I just want to say thank you. I think you have a pretty tough job and that you have a heavy workload and you deal with, you know, the board and the town and also the public. And I always hear positive things about your demeanor and your approach. And as you say, you're looking for compliance, and I just appreciate it very much. I know it's a tough job.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I'll send that down. I second that for you, and your staff is very professional in dealing with folks who sometimes can get quite.
I'm going to leave on a good note.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. All right. So now we have the Housing and Community Development. And as I had mentioned, Eric couldn't be here today, so Ian is going to pinch hit.
Okay, yeah, well, first of all, I'm the liaison to the Housing Department, and it's been just a great honor to be that. I have a great deal of respect for Director Shantz and his whole department and the work that they do. So I'm largely going to read his report as he wrote it and provide a little bit of editorial comments. The mission statement is to provide housing opportunities and support programs for the town residents, primarily through the administration of the following: Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, Community Development Block Grants, CDBG as we often refer to it, the Affordable Home Ownership Program. That's something I know Dave Lease has worked a lot on recently with the Cantwell Court. And the Community Housing Opportunity Fund, CHF, which is a new funding based on a 0.5% tax with real estate transfers that I think provides great opportunities. The 2024 accomplishments: they provided a total of $870,033 in rental subsidies to landlords, which assisted 45 households in maintaining safe and affordable housing. Issued approximately $120,000 in grants for eligible property projects, including improvement for ADA compliance, emergency generators, solar installations, equipment upgrades, and administrative funding for public services. Worked with Community Development Corporation of Long Island, known as CDLI, to help administer the +1 ADU grant program from New York State, which will result in up to 16 grants of up to $125,000 each for local homeowners to construct ADUs. This was a huge success. This was an income-restricted program that, frankly, I worried we might not have applicants who would qualify. That wasn't the case at all. In fact, there was a huge amount of applications, and even though it's being administered by CDLI, the Housing Department, I know, had to put a lot of work that is still ongoing. And I view this as a huge win in that we're achieving affordable housing goals by providing ADUs with outside funding. You'll notice we're going to talk about funding a lot as we're going through the capital plan and budgeting generally. So that was a big success in my mind. They developed, opened and administered the town's first-time home buyers down payment assistance program through the CHF fund, which has approved 6 individual home buyers to date for interest-free loans of up to $30,000 each. And again, this was a program that really warmed my heart, and I was pleasantly surprised by not only the applications that came in, but the people who were applying. You know, we all tell the story of affordable housing and the difficulty of living in town. And these, you know, first-time home buyer loans, it's not a grant, it's a loan, all went to the type of people that we all hate to see leave town. And so it's the beginning of the program, but I think it was a real success. And it's just one part of, I think, a whole, you know, range of things we have to do to improve the housing situation. We obtained pro-housing community status for East Hampton town from New York State Homes and Community Renewal, HCR. And I want to give a lot of credit on this to Supervisor Burke Gonzalez, who I think through through her efforts and coordination with other government agencies, knew that this was a new thing. In fact, I believe we were the first town on Long Island, I may be wrong, but I think the first town to receive this. And it opened up all sorts of doors. And so I think it was Supervisor Burke-Gonzalez's initiative that made this happen. But I also want to give a lot of credit to Eric Shantz and the Housing Department and the Planning Department too, who had to put together a lot of information to make it happen. And I think we've already seen it pay dividends and opening up doors for funding opportunities, not only for housing, but other things as well by showing our commitment to the housing initiatives.
The building department had to pull a lot of records.
Of course.
And we just actually sent an email to Eric this morning because this has to be renewed every year.
I saw that.
So we have until April 30th to renew.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't mean to leave Joe out of that. There was a lot of work by a lot of people that to put that together, and we achieved the designation. The assisted the town in reviewing multiple changes to the town code to promote affordable housing opportunities. Frankly, I've probably created a lot of extra work for Eric in trying to be creative and look at different things we can do with the code to encourage, and there'll be a presentation later on today's agenda actually that reflects that, and there have been others that have come before us. Assisted the town in, began site work at the Cantwell Court Affordable Housing 16-lot subdivision and issued requests for proposals for possible contractors. That is out to bid and coming back soon, I believe, where the bids are in, but it's developing. Initial site work has happened on Cantwell Court, and exciting things happening there. For the 2025 goals, the Community Housing Fund, the launch accessory dwelling units for construction assistance program. So ADU assistance, we've talked about providing encouragement through CHF funds to do that. The town board asked for some legal clarifications that we're waiting to come back, and then we hope to launch a program that will encourage ADUs with town funds. And this is in addition to the CDLI that I mentioned earlier. Continue to devise the Community Housing Advisory Board, CHAB, and refine their process and programs for 2025 based on the knowledge gained in 2024. Last year was the first year we were able to award grants and loans from the CHF fund, and that all comes through the CHAB committee, the advisory board, which again, it's been a great honor to work with them, Chairman Andrew Garvey and the whole committee. I think that they take that job very, very seriously, and the town is better off for the thought and work they put into it. That said, it was the first year last year, and we all have, a lot to learn, and frankly, realize that, $5 million a year or whatever it is, isn't that much money to address the problem that we have. And so I will continue to refine that and make sure we're using the funds as efficiently as possible to do the most good that we can. The administer CHF grants and loans for 5 approved 2024 general projects. So that's the same fund I'm referring to, the projects that we approved last year, which are the Route 114 middle income development, the cottages, which are also on 114, right in that same area towards Sag Harbor, Whalebone apartment renovations, which are existing affordable units that needed renovations, and we're able to get funding through CHF, the Windmill 1 expansion. This is a study to see if they can fit more density for senior housing, and the Green at Gardner's Point, which was funding at the tail end of a project. So those are listed here in 2025 because we decided to award the funds, but there's still going to be a lot of work to do to make sure they're administered properly and tracking those projects as they develop. Other goals for 2025 are to pursue additional changes to the town code to increase affordable housing opportunities within the town. Continue coordination with the Community Development Corporation of Long Island to help administer the +1 ADU grant program from New York State and to help administer the next round of funding. If available, we do hope that there will be more funding available. It's not a sure thing, but I think the year we have under our belt would allow the town and the housing department to work well with CDLI. Pursue possible grant opportunities available as a result of the town's pro-housing community status. Again, I think that that's going to be huge, and I also want to give some credit to Samantha Klein, who helps the town with all sorts of grant opportunities and is constantly looking for things, and has actually helped me with one as an offshoot of this community housing, or this pro-housing community status. Continue to administer the town's affordable home ownership program, Section 8 and CDBG programs. work with other town departments and/or municipalities to find additional affordable housing opportunities such as acquisition of vacant or already improved properties, and finalize the Cantwell Court affordable housing subdivision, including placement of individual families, and begin the physical construction of 16 new homes. So hopefully I didn't butcher that too badly. The housing department and that staff deserves the credit. Very, very pleased to help however I can and be a part of that work. And it's an exciting time with new funding and a very committed board. I'll say that there's, the details of how we approach this issue are going to be tricky, but all 5 members here care deeply about affordable housing. I think that started with the previous administration, all hands on housing, and excited about the things we can do.
Thank you, Ian. Does anyone have questions? I hope they're tough questions for Ian.
I'm good. I'm not going to put you on the spot.
You can. I talk to Eric, not quite daily, but close, so I could probably answer the questions.
Well, one question would be, is there any update with regards to legal advice on ADU funding with CHF?
Yeah, there was a meeting with the attorney we hired to frame who's come back with some advice for what he thinks, but he has crafted a letter to send to the IRS about, I guess the way you ask the IRS about their opinion is in a very precise way, which is why we hired an outside attorney. He's finalized that draft, and I believe it's been sent off, although that meeting was just recently, and I'll confirm that for you. I do think we could have another discussion as a board about the next steps there based on that advice.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you. Patrick, if you wouldn't mind staying, if you could run the next presentation for Ian, because he's going to now be doing the affordable multiple residence recommendation.
Thank you, Patrick.
Great. Thank you. All right, you're up.
Okay, so the affordable multiple residence recommendation, this is something that I've been working with. We've been talking a lot about affordable housing, obviously, since, I've only been on the board for just over a year. The board has addressed a few things. We've dealt with density, going from 8 units to 12 units for senior housing, just recognizing that senior developments were different in the health department requirements and traffic generated. And in order to encourage, units to be constructed and identifying the need, it was easy to say that we should go from 8 units to 12 there. After that, we looked into, and this has not passed yet, we're waiting for comments from the Suffolk County Planning Commission, but we decided to also, I think this whole board endorsed as to the planning board of East Hampton, going to 12 units of density for regular affordable housing developments as well, so long as they met certain standards like a traffic study, the on-site sewage treatment plant, so that the environmental and other impacts were mitigated. And through the course of those conversations, we spoke a lot about what else we can do to address the affordable housing need. As I mentioned, we have ADUs, home ownership program, the CHF funds, but we started talking a lot about the requirements of affordable housing in East Hampton, which currently the AHO, the Affordable Housing Overlay, only allows for developments of 3 acres or more. As we all know, there's not a lot of property in East Hampton that's 3 acres or more, and so that's fairly limiting. It's 125,000 square feet. We wanted to look at, what we do there, if we can address, do we change the standards to reduce that minimum? And currently, there are only 5 properties within the AHO that are under 3 acres. So we came up with some goals for what we'd want to achieve by a smaller development, and what we do is we want to create an opportunity for those properties of less than 3 acres within the affordable housing overlay to also have the opportunity to provide affordable housing. It's sort of a hard cut right now at 3 acres. One of the options was to simply just reduce the acreage and say you could do an affordable housing development on 2 or 1 acre. The problem with that is we wanted to keep the scale and the aesthetic in fitting with the community character. And if you're talking about going from 8 to 12 units, On 3 acres, you can sort of center that and screen and buffer in ways that you just wouldn't have the opportunity on smaller lots. And so 8 or 12 acres seemed excessive on a single acre or a smaller development. And so we came up with the idea of perhaps less, and later we'll get into it, but 4 units per acre might be more appropriate on a single acre lot or on smaller lots. We also wanted to make sure that we coordinated the requirements with other agencies, the Suffolk County Department of Health, for example. These smaller developments probably aren't going to be able to have sewage treatment plants. We envision private ownership or more flexible. So we didn't want to create a program in the town of East Hampton that would have conflict with Suffolk County and make it more difficult for people who might want to pursue these type of affordable housing developments. And we wanted to also look at the future. We don't have any plans right now to expand the affordable housing overlay, but again, there's only so many properties that are 3 acres in size. Where do we go from here if we don't have any tools that allow us to do smaller type of developments that could address the need? So the proposed affordable multiple residence use will be a type of mini affordable housing development. And by the way, Patrick, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be saying change the slide, but you're doing a great job of just reading my mind. So yeah, type of mini affordable housing development. And we would restrict these type of developments to the AHO. And this was a conversation, because do we want to create a use that people can do anywhere in town? The thought now is anything new, we want to be sort of conservative and cautious. And by limiting it to the AHO as it's proposed currently, it gives the town board control. In fact, as I just said, there's only 5 properties that currently exist that are smaller than 3 acres in the AHO. But if we were to expand, it just allows for more opportunity, but still maintaining control to see as things progress. As I said, the only 5 lots currently of 3 acres or less that are in the AHO, but that could change. And again, the goal here is to allow private owners to not only build new developments, but perhaps convert old structures. So if you have a large residential house, we know this happens anyway, perhaps illegally, where people will convert them into multiple apartments. This allows for, the safe and formal means to do that. Okay, so to go through some of the detailed requirements, which I might have sort of given sneak previews of already, but the affordable multiple residence, the proposed regulations and requirements. Again, you can convert a single family residence or create a new multi-family residence on a site. Only allowed in the AHO, the affordable housing overlay. Site plan and special permit approval will be required from the planning board. As we know, the planning board makes sure that things fit in the community, that the traffic is appropriate, et cetera. These are private ownership structure that we're envisioning. Currently most of I think all of the affordable housing developments in East Hampton are either run by East Hampton Housing Authority or other nonprofits, but larger organizations. And it limits us for what we can do. This would allow for private owner to have, say, a 4-unit development on a single acre and just rent out 4 apartments to individuals. They are designed to be rentals. Again, I think co-ops and condos create a structure that can be complex and a little bit confusing. These are meant to be, privately owned and rented by a single landlord owner. As proposed, of course, I envision a discussion where all this could change. The tenants must be residents, that's to live or work in East Hampton, and this is a restriction that we've had on other affordable housing options in East Hampton. The idea being, we don't want to be overly restrictive. I think we want to recognize that a lot of people need a place to live, but the goal of creating more housing in town is for the people that we see who can't afford to stay, who already live here, but lose their cheap rental, or not even cheap, but affordable. So to provide, opportunities for them, or people who are working here or coming to work here. So there's that restriction that, again, to try to further the goal of not, bringing in a bunch of new residents to increase our population, but to recognize the need to keep the people, the community that's currently here, and our workforce in place. The affordable housing, the income limit is going to be 130% of area median income, and the maximum rent would be 130% of fair market rent. This is higher than other places, and a lot of our developments are currently limited to 60 or 80%. But the gap in what it costs to live here versus what that income allows you to afford just is not realistic. And so the town has a cap of 130%, acknowledging that this is a more expensive place to live than Western Suffolk or other places in New York State.
And sorry, what roughly dollar amount that's?
You know, I don't want to misquote the number, and I probably should have had that here. I think 130% of area median income is, you know, I'm not even going to say it, Tom, because I'm going to be imprecise. They have to file, anybody who has a development like this would have to file legal documents, covenants and restrictions to ensure residency, income limit, maximum rent, et cetera. And an annual permit will be required from the Office of Housing and Community Development, just to make sure that any development is being used as intended. The dimensional requirements, these are envisioned to be multi-unit buildings, a maximum of 4 units per building. The minimum lot area is 20,000 square feet, and that's based on, which is roughly half an acre. That's based on the Suffolk County Department of Health requirements, who wouldn't allow this, extra density on substandard lots. And again, we want to make sure that we do our best to not confuse people and align our code with other, county and state requirements. Maximum of 4 units per acre. As I mentioned earlier, currently affordable housing developments can be 8 to 12, which is more appropriate on larger lots, but on smaller developments, we feel that 4 is a better starting place. And the maximum of 12 units on any given lot, and that's because if you go up to 3 acres, that would allow you, 4 times 3 is 12, and then you get into the code language that already exists for larger developments. Maximum of 6 people per unit. There's a maximum of 3 bedrooms, and so 2 people per bedroom is 6 people. Must meet all the dimensional requirements and underlying zoning, coverage, clearing, setbacks, and GFA. So if there were affordable housing overlay that was in a residential area, they would have to meet any of the same requirements that a single-family home would. The idea here is for these to look like typical developments, but actually are housing more families or individuals. I think an example of what this might look like, it's not a perfect example, but the Accabonac Manor Houses, which I think has been a really successful development. That's a condo unit, it's a little bit different, but I think those types of, structures housing, several apartments that look more or less residential is what we're going for here. And there'd have to be 1 on-site parking space for each bedroom. The potential sites for affordable multiple residence, I'm not going to go through this list much. As I mentioned earlier, there's only 5 that are, lots that are smaller than 3 acres that currently are in the AHO, and only 1 of those is not fully developed, which is 67 South Essex Street in Montauk. Next slide. This is a table that goes through those sites with what's there. Again, all of those sites except for the 1 are fully developed and unlikely to take advantage of this. But this chart just shows, it gives you an idea, if anybody knows those sites, how much traffic is generated as per the standard engineering calculation. Next slide. The potential site, I'm sorry. The future expansion of the AHO, this has not been in our conversation with Eric, and Tina from the planning department deserves a lot of credit too, helped Eric come up with this as well. And we haven't gone too far into expanding the AHO. We wanted to make sure that there was a use that the board was behind and that the community was behind before we started talking about making it larger. And that's one of the reasons we restricted it to the AHO, and that the impacts now by this action that I'm proposing would be minimal, and any future sort of expansion, which would allow for more opportunities, would have to be thought of separately. The 2005 comprehensive plan mentions this. They say new construction could incorporate a variety of prototypes and layouts, including multiple apartments into single-family homes, designed to look like the manor house, where in scattered site, 3 or 4 family houses are interspersed. So it's going back as far as 2005, this sort of concept was mentioned. The 2019 East Hampton Hamlet report or Hamlet study mentioned North Main Street as one of these areas where this could take place. Again, we're not proposing it at this time, but we were actually approached earlier last year by somebody in that area asking for this exact type of thing, and we don't have any means to allow for it. So this would be a tool that then could possibly be used in appropriate situations for more housing opportunities. The 2023 Community Housing Fund Project Plan says the needs assessment addresses this. There's many community housing advisory board letters that stress the importance of having rental units available. This is an opportunity for that. And I hope the town board will continue to, if this goes through, we then take the next step and talk about the expansion of the AHO and where that might be appropriate. But in the interest of keeping this conversation as simple as possible, I really want to focus on this as a tool and not get bogged down about where it may not be appropriate or where it is. I think that's a separate conversation, and this is the first step. The benefits of affordable multiple residence. Well, first and foremost, it'll result in more affordable rental units. It'll provide legal workforce housing created by the private sector, businesses, private owners, but typically entities or individuals that aren't involved in the affordable housing game now. And it will mirror existing real estate trends. We already see businesses trying to buy things. We see some cases of overcrowding that are addressing this type of need, and we just want to bring that into legal compliance. Less intensive land use than full-scale affordable housing developments. The hope is that these would blend seamlessly, and it's not a replacement at all for the larger developments, but it's an additional tool we'll have to address a real need. And then again, by putting limited to the AHO, the board can control the number of locations where this goes, and that's a conversation for the future. One thought that Eric has, he puts in here, is we may look at, like the North Main Street, a semi-commercial area, other downtown and commercial areas where it's more typical in the planning world to see more dense developments would provide opportunities for us to possibly expand. But again, I don't want to get bogged down in that just yet. So the next steps would be this town board discussion we're about to have. I'm sure there's going to be further information, changes, other ideas that come out of that. We'll go back to the planning and housing departments. Once we settle on something at this level, we can refer to the planning board for comments, revise the code as needed, further town board discussions as necessary. We'll eventually have to conduct SECRA review, refer to the County Planning Commission, and should this board wish to proceed, we'll have a public hearing. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board, and whatever everybody thinks of this, I'm really happy and grateful that we're having the conversation for something I think is a really important thing in town.
Thank you, Ian. Well done.
Thanks.
I think it's great. I think, look, anything we can do to deliver more housing at this point is the right path, because it's such a dire need, and this to me is a pretty straightforward means of doing that. The only question I have, and it relates to current projects I'm working on myself as well, is like, even with that 130% of AMI as the definition of affordable, like, it cuts a lot of people out. I want to say it's around 150,000. I know we can logic check that, but it's plus or minus 10, 15% in that realm. Like, it's still restrictive for what we consider critical operations to the town, a policeman and a teacher, No, there you go. They're out of recognition for that. So it's just one where, and I'm running to this with ADUs too. We're having this discussion should they be called affordable, or should they just be ADUs, accessory dwelling units? So, I think we just have to be really cognizant of that as we move forward. This is like, who's this housing? And is it enough? Is it doing enough? Because that's my major concern with this. Just other areas again where I think there's crossover. I appreciate that you kind of have gone on with the one parking space per bedroom. I agree with you. That's kind of where we're moving with the ADU piece as well. The only other question here that we kind of did address within the ADU piece is ownership. If it's going to be an LLC owning this, having that designated point person who can be contacted if there's an event with the building is really, really critical. So there need to be a mechanism for that for me. But yeah, overall, I applaud this, and I think good thought and good structure put into it. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer just because I'm doing the presentation. I don't want to cut anybody else off, but I think you bring up a very good point about the need, and I sort of alluded to it with the 130%. We're approaching, higher income people who still can't afford to live here. But even beyond the 130%, I think there is a need. We did speak earlier about sort of a workforce and employee housing development that was trying to get at that. That's complicated. Perhaps this could be a model for that with different income restrictions in the future. But I do want to make sure that the problem is once we go above the 130% AMI with either income or rent, it's no longer technically an affordable development. And so this problem is so huge. I don't want to try to solve everything before doing anything. And to me, this is a really good step. And to your point, if it's successful, it could be expanded perhaps, but I think it makes sense to stay within the framework of, this 130% is an established number that the town is committed to. And you bring a very good point up of, obviously the concern here is how it works. We don't want to have these things pop up and have problem areas. And so having somebody in charge as the landlord would be key. And that will be, we'll have to develop that into the permitting process.
David, did you have any comments you wanted to make?
My comments more go to the location of North Main Street. I advocated for this part of the Hamlet studies. I believe also Bonnie Kapinski did at that time. A very smart location. Many of those locations down there in Indian Hill and Mill Hill, no, not My Hill, whatever it is, Miller Lane Terrace. They're already pre-existing non-conforming in multiple density, either two structures or 2 units in one structure on there too. So I think that is a location that the town board's already looked at to put into the comp plan that should be moved on. The only question on that location is that many of those locations might be less than 20,000 square feet. So I don't know if we do it as a whole, but I know you're talking about this as a separate location. I think that is, if we can run on that at 2 parallel tracks, not to put more work out there.
Yeah.
But I think that is a place that I would assist advocating for also too and working on. Some of the other benefits of the multiple residences, I know we hear about that a lot in Montauk. Montauk CEC is discussed on how can we reasonably design properties to fit what the need is for the workforce out there, but without changing the character of the communities on there. As long as those safeguards are in place, I think you'll see individuals that would be supportive of that then too. I think Tom enumerated on some of the other ones, but yeah, it's something that I would like to continue to discuss also.
I'm very generally supportive of this. I just would say that the need for this, besides the inaffordability for people to live in this town these days, is that there's not many large tracts of land left. So we have to flex and move with the reality that we're presented with as we move forward. I also just want to note that an NAHO for folks is an affordable housing overlay. It's something that we have the ability to place over a tract of land, and that has to be done by public hearing. So there'll be further input. There's always opportunity for input to bring any concerns and support to us if we do expand. It's not waving a wand. It's with public participation. I even look at the idea that we talk about a police officer and a teacher, and when they're first hired, they may fit the criteria, but then as they develop, as Jim Bennett said, not just a job, but a career, and move up through their career and have promotions or their pay increases, then they're out of luck. So I also want to take a look at that. That's kind of the idea that people can get into an affordable unit in the beginning of their careers, but what happens then later on? And that kind of deals with that gap as well for folks that are already in the units where they may only be good for 5 years, and then they have to go get out of town. So that's something.
Just so you know, for the housing authority, if you qualify, say, for one of their housing developments and your income goes up, you don't get kicked out. I mean, you get to stay in the unit. So maybe there's a way that we write the code that if you're, your first year as a police officer and you're on the tenure track as a teacher, that you be able to stay in that unit.
So you reach a threshold where you can afford, if that ever happens with the prices of homes now. So that's, I'm supportive of the code. I think the guardrails are effective and essential, and I think they're well thought out.
And I know even, when we look at properties where, when Scott and Eric bring us properties that we could consider for the town to purchase, we've seen properties that were an acre. They were in a commercial kind of downtown area, and we're like, oh my God, we could put a manor house here and get 4 units, but we can't because of that 3-acre threshold. So I think it's something we should definitely pursue. And I think, as you pointed out here, I think the next step is to bring, the legislation forward, what it looks like, and then we could go through it to see, is there a flexibility where for, half-acre lots in downtown commercial areas where you could get 2 units versus in other, that's already got an AHO over it versus, using the 1-acre threshold for a 4-unit project.
Yeah, well, thank you, everybody. We have worked on the code language a little bit. John Jelnicki's been instrumental, Tina and Eric, as I said. So now that I know there's support for the concept, I'll ask Eric to bring it back and do a better job of answering all the detailed questions that you have. And to Kate's point, and Dave's a little bit too, I think that she brings up a good point, which is affordable housing overlay. There would have to be more public input before we do that. And I'm not one to drag my feet or move slowly here, but I think it's important to separate the concept from a particular location. And the concern is if we try to lump in North Main or some other property and that is objectionable to somebody, that the whole thing comes down. So I think right now we're saying, is this a tool that we'd want to have to use? And then we should dive right into where we might apply it as a separate process.
Makes sense.
With input.
Right. Okay, next up, John, welcome. It's been a while. So we're here, you drafted a memo on 66 Wainscott Main Street following the public hearing that we held in November. And if you could just introduce your memo and then the board will have a discussion.
All right. Basically, I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that the acquisition of the property had 4 classifications for which it was being acquired. Was open space, historic preservation, water quality improvement, and agricultural use. And I wanted you to be aware that some of these uses might not be fully compatible depending on how this board decides to designate the property. For instance, agricultural uses require the allowance of the installation of agricultural buildings as needed for agricultural function. That might not be consistent with a historic designation on the site. They're not going to look like historic structures. They're going to look like agricultural buildings, modern agricultural buildings. Also, water quality improvement can often require the installation of various structures. At present, it's kind of a developing field, and those may change in the future. There's permeable reactive barriers, there's injection wells, there's monitoring wells, things of that sort that are installed, and these two are not necessarily consistent. If the goal was to just maintain the property in a specific configuration, layout, and design that you deem to be the historic nature of the property and just keep it that way, some of these uses might not be consistent. So you have to look at it and see how they all work together. Perhaps maybe call out specific potential future improvements that might be made to the property. I don't know if the idea is to possibly bring some other historic buildings if there should become available as a location that you could locate other historic buildings. What the water quality improvements will be, I don't know. The extent of agricultural use on the property is all these are all factors you have to take into consideration. And I think you need to probably designate and call them out in your plan going forward so that everybody's aware of, what could happen on this property and where it can happen. Whether you want to designate the buildings only, maybe the building in a specific area of the property, or just, the historic buildings as historic buildings and not necessarily the site. These are all things you can or should take into consideration now. Because I wouldn't want to see a situation where the town decides to implement some of these uses that you're contemplating now, but not, especially like a water quality improvement, and you actually have to install structures, and then you have an opposition that you can't do that because the property itself is designated historic and they're not consistent with historic use of the property. So I'm just trying to call out factors that you should consider and discuss and developing a plan for the property going forward. There was some, and I don't know if this was real or not, I did mention nature preserve because I did hear some reference to that. And of course, nature preserve is basically keeping the property as it is, not utilizing it. Agricultural use wouldn't be consistent with the nature preserve. Depending on what the structures were for water quality improvement, might be something we might not want to allow in a nature preserve. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I don't think that's necessarily consistent with the 4 uses that you designated the property for.
So I'll bring this forward because a lot of this came up during a discussion where I started on there then too. Every single property, particularly historical properties, have different qualities and characteristics to it. That's what gets called out in the code that we're looking at as far as the protections and the designations. There's many properties within the town of East Hampton that have been designated locally historic, and also others that have not been. But in the most recent times, some of these properties or the structures have been deemed historic based on funding sources for potential restoration projects, and that's allowed within the CPF law that's there. There are already many protections in place on all the properties that the town purchased with the CPF right now. And then also specifically, there's protections in place that the town code currently allows. Once the town purchases a property and the structures, it has initiated multiple layers of safeguards that are in place that already exist in the town code from CPF legislation, general obligation laws, and without any additional designations. Chapter 112 comes into place currently right now. The town code 64E, the New York State law that governs the management of acquired lands by CPF. This section specifically states, with regards to historic properties, historical and cultural resources shall be managed and maintained in a manner that is consistent with accepted standards for historical preservation. Also, as we are aware, the property cannot change hands without an act of state legislation. That's already baked into the town, the town code and the state CPF general obligation laws. In addition, the town has had a practice and policy to develop management plans, and I think that's what you're getting towards here, John.
Yes.
And it's done on multiple town properties that were purchased with CPF that also have structures. I know Ian is moving forward on multiple ones of those currently for properties, and I could see the same thing exactly happening here. That management plan goes through a review and vetting process that also goes to a public hearing, and two, that would further guide the town to any future use of the property and could further limit or safeguard the property and structures. In that process would go through, again, a public hearing process. Also currently within the town code, additional triggers that are there right now, the review would be sections for agricultural overlay districts and regulations 255-330, and actions on this property would have another safeguard and layer of review through the ARB and other review boards. And also now with the potential addition of local historical designation, the property, buildings on the property in sections 255, 725 give additional review for any additional changes to the structures and settings from the ARB. So hence there's multiple safeguards in place. As we go back into looking at most recently some of our purchases that I've been on the town board for, not even purchases, but historical designations, and going through these from local designations, because a local designation has a higher standard than a state or historical register. State or historical register actually does not give nearly as much protections as local designations. And that's why we have to be very careful with what we do here, and also use it effectively then too. We have adopted a local law in 2019 to designate the Victor D'Amico Institute, the art barge. This is only for the structures, not the underlying land. What's different than that one is then when in 2021, we did a zoning code to designate the second house and the barn as historical landmark. That was not a CPF land, neither of these two or the art barge. We only did the structures, not the designated land underneath. Moving forward, we designated the Dodge property in 2013 as a homestead underlying property. There is an ag use quality to that, but there was not a water quality use to that also. So there's that also. And now we're looking at the John Osborne homestead and landmark on there. What's different in this property solely is that we actually are looking at multiple uses on there that would actually be environmental stewards of the property, but also for the surrounding pond that is there then too. None of those other properties have actually water quality designations to them. They had historical designations, some had ag, and open space, which is top of the list. When we go back into the town's comprehensive plan, and particularly for the plan for Waynescott, out of the comprehensive plan specifically for agriculture, within the plan for Waynescott in the 2005 comp plan to protect the traditional agricultural industry, but our Suffolk County's agricultural industry ranked first in New York State and agricultural-based land south of Montauk Highway, identified as the best farmland in New York State. So agricultural land in Waynescott has been identified as eligible inclusion in the East Hampton scenic area of statewide significance and designations. When we take that one further into specifically the goals of the comp plan, give me one moment just to find that one piece. The designation of solely of the structures on there, and let's remind you, this is the largest piece of property that the town of East Hampton has ever purchased. And it is beautiful. And don't get me wrong, by anyone, I agree with everyone that was saying that that what we're doing here and the town board has seen is to protect the rural character of the areas, but we have to protect it for future needs. If we want to do water quality agriculture and do it in the proper way, it meets all the goals of the comp plan. Specifically, goal 1, maintain and restore where necessary East Hampton's rural, semi-rural character and unique qualities of each East Hampton historical communities. Goal 2, take forceful measures to protect and restore the environment, particularly groundwater. Goal 6, this is very important here, encourage and retain traditional local resource-based fishing and agriculture industries that practice environmentally sensitive methods of operation, which I believe in the other RFAs that we've done, sorry to get back to you on this one then too, as I just saw it earlier, many of those RFAs don't allow for the use of chemicals, herbicides, or anything on our town properties then too. So that goes back into what the code is, and we've done that successfully. The majority of the money that the town of East Hampton has purchased in the CPF since I've been on the town board has been for agriculture, the Bistrian properties, Farmhouse Lane, Cedar Street, the Hoff property upcoming, and this one also. And then lastly, goal 7, to protect historical buildings, hamlets, neighborhoods, landscapes, and scenic vistas. That's what's extremely important by having open space here from incompatible development. That was the town board has to do. It's not what we want to do, it's what we have to do. And that's what we can continue doing here with the safeguards in place and the continued ones there. So I still continue to advocate that it's appropriate here for future to be able to designate the structures here, because the protections that are there will protect the land also too. That's what I have.
Thank you. And Dave, thank you for kind of giving over those protections. I think it's good. I think relatedly, John, I mean, you know, for those who are advocating for the designation to change to include the lands, you know, can you explain what protections would be given, if any, with that designation that they would not otherwise receive?
Just by virtue of the fact that you've acquired this property as a CPF property, you have a lot of protections that are already built in. You can't utilize the property in any fashion that you please. You're restricted to your use. And these categories have limitations as to what can be done in each category. For instance, open space, you're certainly not allowed to, you know, construct a lot of improvement. I mean, you can do small improvements to make it accessible to people. You can have trails, you could have maybe a parking area, things of that sort. Agriculture is under our code already very restrictive. You have a limitation as to what percentage of coverage you can have with agricultural buildings. You'd be held to that as well if part of it was used for agriculture. Even water quality improvements are going to have to be consistent with the goals of CPF. You're not going to want structures that are going to be that would come. Well, you have to. That's going to be a balancing test then, because you're going to look at the overall benefit that you're going to gain from the improvements versus any impact it might create. And you'd have to do an analysis of that.
If I can just jump in, I think he said the balancing test, that is extremely important here. As the management plans get developed on there, which is the next step in this process, there's extreme limitations can be placed through what is appropriate that the town board also has to still continue going on. So exactly. That's one of them also.
Exactly. I mean, it's a pretty highly protected parcel already just by nature of its CPF acquisition. And it's not an awful lot of things you could allow to have happen on it. And you've designated only these specific areas as areas to be future uses going forward, and they'll be fine-tuned through your management plan as to how that would occur.
So I know Scott's here.
Yeah.
We brought up management plan. Could we just explain what the process is as far as what happens with the creation of a management plan?
Sure, and actually we're going to be starting on this property next. We're just finishing up the Dodge property management plan, which should be introduced to the board over this next month. Our next property management committee meeting is actually on site at 66 Wainscott, Maine. The committee wants to walk the buildings, et cetera, get some better understanding and idea of the property. From that meeting forward, we'll begin the creation of a plan. The plan is basically a basic guide on how the town board proposes to the public what they want to see happen on that site, any future user groups for the structures in particular, for example. It gives you a nice framework for them to come in and say, okay, we have an understanding of the management plan that you could do these things. We're a licensee, we're a nonprofit organization, we'd like to license a structure. It gives them framework. It also gives me as the land manager a framework, because then I can keep tabs on what actually is happening, what they say is going to happen, what they propose to happen, and what actually is happening. And so we can keep tabs on that and keep everybody managing that property within the scope of the management plan. So it's a great overall guide for all concerned parties that might have an interest in property. It also provides protections because there's a list of cans and there's a list of can'ts within a management plan.
So my question then is management plan, is there an ability for a future board to amend a management plan?
A future board can amend a management plan only through the public hearing process, but yes, you could do that.
There was a comment here, a commenter about a playground. There is no recreation on this, so there can't be a playground here. So there's some inconsistencies with what the information is being put out there. CPF, when you purchase it, you would have to put in for recreational use. This does not have it, is that correct?
Correct.
So that cannot happen on this property, that specific.
You could do, I mean, I would consider a trail a passive recreation. That's an appropriate use on an open space property, not a playground, not an active playground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel it's quite that straightforward, if I'm really honest. I feel like we have approved management plans out there that, we don't necessarily follow through. And I think also, like, if we're talking about, say, the 66 Main property, when we do the management plan for that, are we going to take into account site planning? Things like what the parking requirements might be adjacent to the Osborne House for whatever proposed uses we might start to accept in there. I think there's kind of a level of complexity that slightly gets confusing with the management plans, because I think they are seemingly more visionary instead of being applicable in some cases.
That's true.
So I have some questions as well, because as I stated in public, in the acquisition of this property, the importance of the vista and to all of us in the town, the importance of preserving the history, which we saw a lovely presentation of the family history on this property when we bought it. And for me, as I indicated, a very important part of the purchase of this property and the amount of money that we're spending is for water quality for the Wainscott Pond that is severely, it's one of the worst, most polluted, most impacted water bodies on Long Island. So the reason why we were thwarted in any ability to use CPF or public-private partnership or anything to improve the water quality there, which greatly impacts the residents there, is the fact that you cannot do water quality projects, access water quality funding from CPF if there is not public access. So that was a really important factor for me in supporting the purchase of this property. So I would, when we talk about water, what types of structures are used for water quality projects, I know many of them require disturbance of land to put in permeable barriers, construction, a lot of underground work that has to be done. And then as we did in Pussy's Pond, obviously, anybody can go take a look at the water quality projects. You won't see them, bioswales, all kinds of things to help that pond out. And I would ask, does the historic property designation forbid the construction of underground water quality improvements for this, that would be for the pond?
It's a good question, and I think it's one we don't really have an answer to yet because we haven't done it and had a challenge to it. I think that the important part would be to call that out as an anticipated use, anticipated improvements, at the very least, because what you'd want to show a court that, in fact, you anticipated these additional improvements being made to the property in spite of the designation.
So would you say then that, John, that putting the historic designation on the property could complicate the water quality, potential water quality projects that we would need underground?
I do think that it could, because it gives a tool to somebody who wants to challenge that occurring, to argue that it's not consistent with the historical designation.
Thank you.
It would come out, I'm not really sure. I mean, there are an awful lot of cases related to uses of historic properties, and they're kind of all over the place.
Yeah, not a fan of, leaving it up to a judge. And I'm sure they're not either because they have giant caseloads.
That's the other side of it, especially when you're dealing with CPF properties, which is a very narrow area of properties, and most judges don't have a lot of experience at all with that. They may have some historical property designation experience, but CPF, they tend to always kind of look back to the towns and say, what do you guys say? So.
Right. I mean, so I mean, even with the buildings, as they become historically designated, what are our requirements then to maintain those buildings in that existing structure? And similarly for the land, were to have that designation,
right,
what would our fiscal responsibility be to keep the property in that state? Would we be legally obliged to do so?
You are supposed to do that.
Yeah. Right.
It's an obligation.
I think we're meant to do that no matter what we designate.
That's true.
But by historically designating the structures, it gives them greater amount of review if there has to be any changes to it, demolition changes. Even most importantly, it gives an avenue of non-tax revenue to be able to use for this. It doesn't come off the town's tax base; it comes from a transfer tax to restore. And one of the current structures there is a plethora of restoring, millions of dollars worth of restoring.
Ian, did you?
Oh, I just have a couple of more. Sorry, wasn't finished. So, I've heard, as the liaison to Wainscott, I've heard folks being very concerned that if we didn't put the designation on the property, that this could potentially in the future boards turn into, a huge parking lot. For beach access or pond access. When we say would that be able to happen if we left the property out of the historic designation? Because like the playground, that's one of the things that are out there.
I don't see that being any different than any other situation. The only way that I could see that happening is whether it was designated in the property or otherwise, is an alienation of the property somehow that's approved by the legislature of the state of New York, which requires a substitute of equal value or more. So I don't really see that. It's certainly not a possibility under the CPF regulations to do that.
Thanks. I think that's important for folks to know. Those CPF regulations are quite stringent on what we're allowed to do, and any future board would be allowed to do it either. I think those are some really strong guide rails. And just, we talk about passive recreation, certainly trails or whatever. Do we have a definition in the town code for passive recreation?
We don't. It would be something that it's kind of static right now. And there are a lot of definitions of what people view to be passive recreation. And then it's mainly like something that allows you to utilize the property, but not disturb the property to any great degree. And it's just more passive trails, walkways. You see a whole list of different items. Flying kites and hiking and boating, and there's a lot of, but those that get a little more specific. And I actually haven't seen it in any code, at least not in New York. I have seen some other states that have some definitions, and they really talk about maintaining the natural layout of the property, the topography, not interfering with any of that, but being able to just utilize it in a very non-intrusive way, basically.
And as David pointed out, recreation is not on the enabling legislation.
Well, passive recreation, if you consider walking or hiking, something like that, walking through it.
I consider that strenuous. Okay, that's just me.
And that's also part of the CPF laws about public access to the public lands.
Correct.
On land too, where we've done like wood chip trails to the water in the past.
I think of, I don't know what Pussy's Ponds is designated, but it's nature preserve.
It's a nature preserve. It's not a CPF property. That was a nature preserve and a gift.
Which I think we had to do because we didn't have the CPF at the time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't think CPF existed back then.
I don't know the dates, but I don't think so either.
And I think that's why we had, the nature preserves originally were an attempt to do what the CPF laws subsequently are able to do.
I don't know if this property, my reading of the code, if this would even reach the standards of a nature preserve, because typically a nature preserve has never been disturbed.
Yeah.
This property has been completely disturbed for hundreds of years.
But in lieu of that, we have the CPF protections with everything that we buy for that property.
And other sections in the town code too.
I think those are my questions. Thank you. I think that's it. Have we ever done water quality on any other historic properties? Just a question.
Not that I'm aware of, no. No. If water quality wasn't one of the designations when you acquired it, one of the purposes for acquisition, you can't do it. That's the reading of the law, as put forth by former Assemblyman Thiel. So,
and
we're sticking to.
I know it wasn't a presentation to us, but I believe Dr. Gobler did a presentation to the trustees with regards to the water quality in this body, and it's like the second worst in the town, if I'm not mistaken.
It's the worst on Long Island.
Right.
It's the most impacted, and this is how we have a history, and speaking of Dr. Gobler, of how with water quality initiatives, private-public partnerships, et cetera, this water body can be rehabbed.
That's the goal.
Because they've been quite successful at Georgia Pond.
And I was at that presentation, Tom, and Dr. Gobler was talking about how he couldn't access it to do anything.
Right.
And so this purchase, as Kate has mentioned, allows for us to make a difference. You can even see from the aerials that the quality's bad, the water quality.
And just the question about the third structure, is there the reasoning behind not putting that into historic designation?
Not for me necessarily then too, but it's such a small structure that it could be maintained from a small amount of CapEx if needed.
So that's how you're looking at it, is funding.
At this point, yeah.
My question is, whatever we were to do, if we were to proceed with the two structures historically designated, is there anything that precludes us from changing that in the future, adding, the third structure or the whole property? Is it a choice that we make now that really restricts us later?
I mean, is there an interest by the board in designating all three structures? You have to rehear it.
Well, you could, we could, I mean, we heard it as the two structures. We could adopt it as two structures and go back and have a separate public hearing.
Oh, you could.
For the playhouse, for the third structure.
That's my point, is that I think nobody objects to us with the two structures. It's just adding something onto that. It's been heard. So my inclination is we do this knowing that we're not making a final decision. If the board changes their mind or a future board wants to include the rest of the property, at least we're doing something good.
Just like you rehear it.
Right.
So, Jake, is that a substantive change?
Yes.
Oh, we need to hear.
Yes, it is. You have to hear. We've already asked Rob that. You have to rehear it.
Okay, well, I just want to know.
But do you mind if I just piggyback on what you just said? So let's just say we adopt today and we cover the two structures. We can go at a later date this year and do the third structure. We then develop the property management committee that, Ian's liaison to, develops the management plan. We could, after we know what's going there and maybe have gotten input from the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee and have a plan forward for remediating Wainscott Pond, we could come back with the carve-outs that you mentioned and later designate the entire property historic.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a methodical way to do it. And so we not go in blindly, my perspective, and until we really know what it is we're working with there, because we don't know how we're going to remediate that pond.
That's exactly what I was thinking, and I would hate to pause this because everybody agrees that the two structures should be preserved as historic. We need another hearing to do more than that anyway. So the good we can do today is that, as long as we're not, handcuffing ourselves for the future. I also just want to say that this property is such a special CPF purchase. The reason we've had so much interest at that time and now, we all have the same goals. Everybody loves that property. Everybody agrees it should look much like it does today. So there's not a difference in goal here. It's just how we achieve that. And I just want to point a couple of things out. I trust everyone's intentions are very good, but I think a nature preserve is kind of contradictory to the historic use, which is agricultural. So, everybody's trying to articulate that they want this property to stay the same. And I think the board agrees. I think, as Kathy just said, we don't want to maybe make this big step that you can't undo as easily as we can add on to this in the future. So, and Dave pointed out all the CPF, protections that are already in place. It's not like we can sell the property or develop it in some crazy way. I think Kathy said it best, which is this is the methodical approach, and we'll see where it leads.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So now we have our last topic today, and that's.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Scott.
John, good to see you.
See you too.
We have town code amendments to the Bureau of Administrative Adjudication. Yeah, that would be helpful, Jake. Thank you. And we've got Jake Turner, our Senior Assistant Town Attorney, presenting his recommendation to us. Welcome, Jake.
Good afternoon, Madam Supervisor, Town Board. So what I have done is looked at the Civil Enforcement and Administrative Adjudication Chapter 62 of our Town Code, affectionately known as the BAA, Bureau of Administrative Adjudication. What I have proposed that we do is permit the filing of judgments, whether they be default, meaning nobody's appeared, or a resolved judgment, meaning somebody's appeared and a judge has decided that the person is culpable, that we are permitted to take those judgments and file them, record them in any court of competent jurisdiction within the state. Namely, what we are looking at is the Supreme Court allows us to file them in Riverhead. Therefore, when a title search is done, they show up and they must be satisfied in order for a title company to give clear title. The language that is utilized in this mirrors exactly I got to get this one right, New York State General Municipal Law. That is the state law that permits the town to create the BAA. When this code was enacted at the town level, instead of one word, a phrase was used, town justice court. Instead, as we have implemented this program, we have found that it is necessary to permit us to file these judgments in Supreme Court. I've had many conversations with the BAA director and other attorneys in the court system, and we feel as though this is the best way to go.
So I'll just start because I was a liaison to the creation of the BAA and also to Justice Court, and I fully support this change in the code. I think it is necessary to be able to expand our ability to adjudicate and have a disposition on a summons that's been received through the BAA. I think we're handcuffed right now and limited on that. So I think that this expands the opportunity, which I think is a good thing.
Jake, would you just explain for someone who does have a judgment coming against them, what this change would mean for them in terms of procedure, of how they're going to get processed?
So one thing to keep in mind is that the judgment is at the end. So person receives a ticket, they either pay it, great, no problems. They don't pay it, then it could go to default, which means it's settled down to a judgment and it is filed in a court. And then when a title report is done, it shows up. Same thing with if they decide to fight the allegations, then if they still decide not to pay it, it will be a judgment and it's filed. So it affects nobody in any way, shape, or form on the merits of an allegation. It just goes to giving the town more teeth and more tools needed to ensure that that fee is paid.
And if someone objects to the ticket, I'm not going to say fight it. If someone objects to the ticket, they have a process where that it is separate from needing to go to justice court, but it's still adjudicated by the judge.
All due process rights are still protected, but that's in the beginning. This is at the end.
Okay, everybody good with it?
Yeah, so I haven't followed this as much, but I trust in Kate and what you're putting forward here, and I can understand where you're moving it. So yes, I look forward to going to public hearing.
This has been the result.
I had Steve Dukolsky, who's our director of the Bureau of Administrative Adjudication, say that 3 times fast.
BAA.
And he has requested this change, as has Jake.
He's the one that I've been speaking mostly with, and we have spoken to court attorneys. Rob Conley and I have gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, so that's what we came up with.
So if you could have this on to notice it on Thursday, the 6th, and we hear it on the 20th, that would be great.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. All right, so we're through the topics, and now we're on to liaison reports. So Tom,
yes,
you're up.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. First, we have the Amagansett Citizens Advisory Committee. We'll be meeting next Monday, the 10th, 6:30 p.m. at the Amagansett School Library. Human Services, we have a free health fair March 7th from 11 to 2 p.m. St. Luke's Church in the main hall meeting room. That's sponsored by the East Hampton Healthcare Foundation. Meal counts for the week Feb 24th through Feb 28th. The congregate meal program was at 81. Grab and go, we had 87. We also have monthly blood pressure readings. Wednesday, March 5th from 10 to 2 at the center. And we have bilingual Tai Chi classes this month, March 4th, 11th, 18th, and 25th at 11 a.m. Just a few cancellations to notice. Functional fitness on Wednesday, March 5th at 11 a.m. is canceled. It will be back the following week. Chair yogas is canceled for Tuesday, March 11th at 11 a.m. Will also resume the following week. And Qigong dance is canceled Thursday, March 13th at 10 a.m. Also will renew the following week.
Digitization, we had a request from the Disabilities Advisory Committee to get their historic meeting minutes digitized so those records are forever held in the town. If my fellow board members are amenable to that, it's something I wanted to work with Siri on and getting those over and getting those uploaded.
Yeah, I mean, that, or maybe it could be done internally, no?
Possibly, yeah, we got to see how much it is. I mean, with regards to Siri, right now, no one is using that stipend we have with him, so would be.
I think that, yeah.
Becky wants-
that Becky
yeah,
and
we'll
Jeannie are
talk.
going through that to see, to
Okay.
just confirm the, where the project stands, doing some quality control and all of that.
Great. Brooks Park, myself and Ian met with the Brooks Park Board leadership last week just to kind of review where we are with that plan. And, listening to the 66 Wainscott piece, there's a lot of crossover there because here you have a building that has an approved plan, that has a historic designation, that do we commit funds to maintain? And so, there was a lot of back and forth on that. Where we've left it at this point is they have had a draft copy of the Duck Creek license kind of sent over to them. They've kind of going to come back with their changes. We'll then review that with the board members. And, Ian and I kind of rightfully said, I think it'd be helpful to see, what does a P&L look like for you guys in year one? What do you think your operating costs are going to be? How are you going to have the revenues to meet that? The piece it does get to, I think, with all these historic properties is I think we need to have some kind of rubric in place that we're treating them the same way as we look to designate funds for them. So, you have someone coming in wishing to operate. What is expected of people? I think just having that cleared out, because I think otherwise you do have projects like this that have been sitting there for many, many years, not moving forward. And, I think we need to do some due diligence in that. East End Fire Commissioners, I'm setting up a meeting with Brian Gallagher. He's looking to get permission from his leadership team to come out and meet at the Northwest Woods locations. As noted, he's one of the few burn masters on Long Island, but before he does that, he does need to get that. So I'm following up with the DEC to try and get that permission to help us kind of come up with our management plan for those areas. Disabilities Advisories Board, we met last week, as well as the digitization piece. There's still continued push to have a work session on what the universal build design process is, and how we should look to incorporate that in new town projects. I think there's some misunderstanding of actually what that encompasses in terms of the build out. So having that cleared up and understanding what the cost implications are, both short and long term, is good. And then additionally, we have, thank you very much to the Recreation Department. We have new signs that will be going up at the parking spaces with ADA facilities in the town. You'll see a QR code that will be up there at the beach locations. As you scan that QR code, it will tell you about resources you can use to access the beaches, be it access to beach wheelchairs, access mats, etc., and other facilities within the town. So I think it's a big win for our community there. Anti-bias task force. It's been a while since my last full liaison report, so I didn't go into detail on this in the last meeting, but I will say in our last meeting, it was very tense. There is great concern about the recent decisions coming from the federal government, and just the consensus that, as is often the case in these situations, those with the least power become those who are on the receiving end of poor decisions, and in this case can be biased. And so just to remind the community what this committee is out there for, it is a community resource which people can turn to when they have complaints about bias race-related incidents. They can organize activities and forums to educate the community with respect to issues of bias and thereby foster goodwill and understanding in East Hampton town, and advise and inform the town board concerning the appropriate responses to bias-related issues. One follow-up question they did have is there any update on legal guidance that the town is receiving with regards to any actions or feedback, or no?
No.
Okay.
Tom, I think, why don't you meet with Patrick and we could promote the anti-bias task force, give out the phone number,
Sure.
on social media.
Sure.
I think one thing with that committee, and we can talk about it online, offline, they are in an interesting process of finding their new direction. Because I think, one thing that came up in that last meeting is, and that's one of the reasons I'm reading out the mission statement for what that committee is there's some things that a town committee can do, and there's things a town committee cannot do. So we're actually going to have the town attorney's office come to the next meeting to really clearly spell that out, because a lot of these frustrations that are voiced, while I might share the concerns that are driving them, that's not the remit of the town. I think we have to be very clear on that as well. That is, sorry, one other really good piece of little news. One good one. More challenging. The Arts Council Committee is working in progress with the Human Services Department to offer more art classes at the Senior Center every other Tuesday. We'll have a rotating group of teachers coming in to do that, but that's something that'll be moving forward soon. And then lastly, Business Committee met last week. Discussion there was a lot around the GFA formula changes. There is, I think, as we're all aware, big concern about what the impacts are to local businesses of these proposed changes. But additionally, in that meeting, there was also a very interesting presentation by the Montauk Chamber of Commerce. It was a SWOT analysis of where they see business in Montauk and where they see opportunities and threats as well for the future. So I have a follow-up meeting with the chair of the chamber next week just to review some projects that they're interested in seeing moving forward, wastewater being one.
What type of analysis? I'm sorry.
SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, and yeah.
Could you share that with us?
Yeah, as Leo sends it over, I will do.
So to my town board members, I left my liaison report, my actual one, in the printer, so I'll try my best here going off the old one. SCALP is a notice for SCALP for a public hearing for SCALP, which is Suffolk County Aquaculture Lease Program. Expiration date on this is May 2nd, 2025. Please contact Suffolk County as they are looking at proposed new lease aquaculture sites in the Peconic Bays and Gardner Bay. Also, Montauk CAC met last night. A small discussion. There was numerous support there for some of the zoning code amendments that are coming up this week. There was also a request for potentially, as Tom had mentioned, for one of maybe the fire commissioners or East End, yourself, fire commissioner, someone from the East End Fire Chiefs to come in and discuss the fire load and preparations and such. So maybe Tom, I will talk offline on that. In recreation, as Tom mentioned about the signs, we're also recreation signups are going for nipper guards and junior lifeguarding training. Please go to the town's website for those. You're also seeing recreation in multiple locations that we have right now. We're reinstalling safety padding that includes Maidstone Park and other locations then too. Again, as Little League comes right now, and I believe they're starting to do Little League evaluations, that goes through the East Hampton Little League Board. Please Google their website. I believe they're going to start playing in about 4 weeks. Wow. It's coming fast. Let me see here. I'm trying to remember it all. The Nature Preserve Committee met on the 13th of February. Unfortunately, I was not able to make it, so I didn't have a report for the last time, going over what they had talked about on there. The maintenance report was very similar. They did some mowing of the properties, cutting fallen trees. They actually removed a hunting stand from the Osborne property. And fence from the driving path in some of those locations. They did reclose vandalized windows that happened at Brooks Park also then too, and some other encroachments in other locations. They continued the discussion on Girard Drive about a management plan for some of those properties. They're going to move that forward and trying to get that to the town board, or they might be discussing on adding that to the changes to Chapter 182, which is talks about nature preserves and also town properties. That goes back to the main discussion that they had was revisions to Town Code Chapter 162. This has been a slow burn. This is, I think, first started 10 years ago. They took by unanimous consensus in the Nature Preserve Committee, recommend the changes to the generic management plan outlined Chapter 182 on various enforcement violations of protected lands. They recommended that, and they'll be getting that to the town board from their chairman shortly. That again would come to another town board discussion, town public hearing and such also. Let's see here. They had a member Jim Grimes and another individual, Alex Bluedorn, discuss a proposal for a restoration of a wetlands near the Willis Point Road and Cloden Point, which is a nature preserve in that location. They are interested in proposing the restoration of a part of the reserved area, which is a wetland, a pond in there, to cut down phragmites and restore the pond. This project would be funded as a private partnership with the town. The committee was in support, and they'll send more information to the town board, and we can bring that to the town board discussion in the future. Lastly, a couple updates. Stephen Hans Path, Long Lane, the public safety, road safety project there is move along. It's slowed down because we're waiting for Verizon to move some wires off the poles there. That is the same that is happening at 114, and also Stephen Hans Path is just removing some of the wires. You can't do a lot of the drainage or the road work without the wires and the poles being removed. At Cantwell Court, Suffolk County Water Authority has requested an amended fee schedule that is coming up for a resolution for next, I believe on Thursday, and they should be there installing the water main by next week, as we told, as we've received a DOT permit for that finally on that project. That is all I have, and I'll come back on Tuesday with more. I apologize.
Great. Thank you, David. Kate?
Yes, thanks. The Wayne-Scott CAC met. It was well attended, not just by the members of the CAC, but it was a full room of people who live in the hamlet, residents of the hamlet. That's not unusual for that group. A guest speaker was Katie Casey of the East Hampton Housing Authority. First, I want to thank her for all the time that she put in on a Saturday morning, coming out to explain what the entity of East Hampton Housing Authority is. The name confuses people, and they frequently think it's the housing department for the town. She spoke about the 114 project. She was it was a wonderful conversation, very insightful and productive on how the Housing Authority develops a project, designs a project, and all the considerations, community considerations, school district, everything that's put into place. And her openness and her knowledge was deeply appreciated by the committee members there and the residents as well. The airport remains a concern of the residents. There is a new liaison to the airport subcommittee, Mark Franz, who was newly appointed to the committee, and I believe he's made some appointments to meet with Jim Brundage to understand operations.
With him in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so that's I think he's a fresh face, and I welcome him to the committee. Of course, the issues discussed were traffic safety, pedestrian safety, and also with David's permission, I was able to convey the projects, the stop signs and crosswalks that David had emailed his support for, with the caveat that in public hearing, new information, that recommendation can change. That was much appreciated by the committee, and I think is reflected in.
That's just my opinion on there.
Yeah, they understood that, but they appreciated the feedback on that. I did have a separate resident, not a member of the committee, who came and spoke of in a totally different area of the town, but one that I'm familiar with because one of my doctors is in the office buildings there in Wayne-Scott, regarding using cross Westgate to Eastgate and the cut through crossways. This is very short roads in a kind of a Z that is heavily used if you want to get back to Wainscott, to the traffic light so that you can make a left. And what he said, he's a very long-term resident, and what he's also seeing now with the business activity at the pit is that now he's having big cement trucks and commercial trucks also go through this. These are very, very narrow streets. I'll be looking for support for a recommendation for at least to reducing that heavy truck traffic. I also think that saves road pavement, because I don't think those small streets and the pavement in those residential neighborhoods were meant for that kind of heavy construction equipment. But also, these are very narrow streets, highly residential. There's a lot of sight lane issues with it. It's a quick left, quick right, quick left, quick right, to be able to get back to that to the traffic light and avoid trying to make a left turn west of the traffic light onto Montauk Highway. So he was talking for some of his neighbors, and I'll be just bringing that forward on a totally separate track from any of the other recommendations. Sustainability Committee met. They were talking about their priorities for 2025. It was a very productive meeting. Of course, moving from our composting pilot program to educating folks that, hey, you don't have to leave your house and take your food scraps to some location and take time out of your day. You could do it in your backyard. So that's going to be the next education phase. And for the Sustainability Committee also, I'm going to bring folks information on asking you to proclaim that East Hampton will participate in International Earth Hour, which is scheduled for Saturday, March 22nd, between the hours of 8:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. I'll have more information on that. I left that flyer in my printer as well. But the East Hampton Village is participating, and we're just looking at a potential proclamation to support Earth Hour. It's turning your lights off for an hour to acknowledge greenhouse gas emissions that are caused by electricity production. Not dissimilar to some of the other National Cleanup Day, except it's only an hour in the evening. They're also going to bring back and for discussion as a recommendation some of the tree protection legislation that's already been discussed. We had actually had a public hearing on the bamboo, but there was some comments from the public, and I think that sort of fell off on bamboo restrictions. And also, David, you had spoke about protecting street trees.
Critical root zone protection.
Yeah, critical root zone protection. That's something they'd like to bring back to the board. And also expanding the gas-powered leaf blower transition to electric. They looked at some other towns. For example, White Plains offers a tighter usage period and has a down-the-line complete phase-out date. They'll be coming back to the board on these recommendations. And again, recognizing that we're always looking to transition rather than ban. Litter Action Committee has sent this board a list of recommendations. I forwarded those recommendations. They took a lot of time and thought into this in the area of code enforcement, temporary sign placement, and I don't know if board members who go past Springs Fireplace Recycling Center or Montauk have noticed or ever noticed the cover and secure your load. It's the law signs trying to get the litter from flying out the back of open trucks. They have a sign design also that they'd like to propose for that messaging that I could send to the board. Also, they have recommendations for trash cans, rental agreements, and an anti-litter campaign. They're meeting here in the main meeting room on Wednesday at 4 p.m. If board members can just take a look at those recommendations and give some thoughts, that is on their agenda. The zoning code amendments, there's a public hearing on March 6th, 6 p.m. in right here in Town Hall, regarding a change, recommended change to the GFA formula. And that's where we are with that. I'm on the the Peconic Estuary Partnership Management Team, and they had their meeting, and I just wanted to highlight some of the projects that are funded for East Hampton, which is monitoring the oil injection at a permeable reactive barrier, 3 Mile Harbor at Tambar Creek. They also have a continued partnership with stakeholders of East Hampton Town's Accabonac Harbor and are working with SMART teams, which are regional experts that have developed an emerging minimally invasive wetland restoration technique to restore over 30 acres of salt marsh at Accabonac Harbor. It's permit-ready plans, and they're going with a final workshop to aid in permitting. Outreach on this project has continued. PEP partners with the Accabonac Protection Committee and goes to their meetings and assists in the field work led by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, along with the Nature Conservancy effort to survey for salt marsh sparrows, and also the funding of $105,000 this year for the Lake Montauk stormwater control. They're still doing their nitrogen reduction outreach and are looking to encourage and partner with Suffolk County on funding to increase the maintenance grants that are available. Of course, we partner with Suffolk County in providing grants for people to be able to update their aging septics to low nitrogen, the latest technology in removing nitrogen from septics before it gets back out into our groundwater. They also have which I didn't know about, a homeowners reward program. This year, they'll continue to provide financial rewards for homeowners who remove turf and pavement and add green alternatives to their residential private properties that benefit the environment. Homeowners can earn up to $500 to offset the expenses of installing green infrastructure on their properties, which includes rain barrels and rain gardens and native plant gardens. So I hope that rewards programs opens applications on March 17th. They need to update their website and get us a current application, and then I hope we can do another social media blast. I know we've done it before. Two town NGOs are mini grant winners of PEP grants. That's a Perfect Earth project with reducing nitrogen pollution in the Peconic Estuary watershed through residential outreach and nature-based land care education, and the Accabonac Protection Committee with enhancing water quality communications in the Accabonac watershed. They're also looking for another grant for PFOS and PFOA legislation on the county level. The important date is June 5th, to save the date for their biennial shoreline summit. And this is to bring stakeholders from across the estuary who are involved in shoreline protection and adaptation projects. Presentations will share info on the process of technical resources being developed for shoreline managers and regulators. I also attended the State Senator Anthony Palumbo's and New York State Assemblyman Tommy Don Schiavone's environmental roundtable, carrying on the tradition that was started by Senator Laval and Fred Thiel. It was well attended. A rough estimate was about 75 to 80 people at Suffolk County's Culinary Institute. The discussion was engaging, informative, and critically important. Subjects range from coastal resilience to community beach nourishment funding, county, state, and federal funding sources for multiple environmental causes, implementation of Clean Water Act funding, New York State environmental bond monies. We spent over 2 hours touching on water quality, emerging contaminants in drinking water, sea level rise, southern pine beetle, and so many more issues that face our town. Multiple levels of government were represented, as were many non-for-profits. CCOM was there, Peconic Estuary Partnership, Peconic Land Trust, Eastern Long Island Chapter of Surf Riders, Cornell Cooperative Division and Nature Conservancy. Every organization and governmental entity represented in the room relies on federal funding to continue the work. And I also advocated, since there was a representative from Congressman Lalota's office, on the importance of FEMA for municipalities like ours. And I was thinking about maybe we could join together with other municipalities to send some information up to Congressman Lalota on how important FEMA is for our recovery efforts, and for also like funding for the ditch plains dune that we're in the process of going through the permitting for to be a FEMA compliant dune. I will have a grant update. I will have an update on ditch plains for our next meeting, which is in Montauk, and also on the agenda there'll be a $600,000 grant update presented by Samantha Klein. We have movement from the state on moving forward with that update, and that's all I have.
Great, thank you, Kate. Ian?
Yeah, I'll have just a brief liaison report. First of all, to answer Tom's earlier question, 130% AMI. I've got the precise numbers, so my patience avoided me making a mistake. For one person, it's $142,220. For two people, $162,500, and for three people, $182,780. Thanks to Joanne Pilgrim from the Housing Department for getting that to me. So, you know, for one, it's quite a bit, but as you go up, you realize that so when you have a professional couple, it gets very tricky, and you make a really good point. So something to explore later. Otherwise, I want to focus mainly on the Property Management Committee, which met on February 26th. I think that's relevant to a lot of the things we've talked about today. We are finalizing the Dodge Property Management Plan. And the approach to that, and hopefully we'll present it soon, is to make it as broad as possible so that we're really open to all good ideas and restricting only the bad ones. But I look forward to bringing that, Scott said, within the month. Hopefully that we can meet that goal. And shortly thereafter, as Scott alluded to, we'll work on 66 Wayne Scott Main Street. There are two structures there. We've talked about them today. We'll want to come up with a management plan for those, as well as the whole property. And then generally what I want to focus on here is the CPF, the restoration budget. There is a certain allowance, and I mentioned this earlier, for historic restorations and maintenance. And the more properties that we have, I think the more important it becomes that we use that money. It's become clear to me that fiscal responsibility is important and difficult with all the rising costs. And so I think the extent we can tap into different revenue streams and CPF, while it still is technically a tax, it's outside of our general funding, and I think that we should take advantage of it whenever possible. So we have structures. The Carl Fisher House needs work. The Edwards House, which we've authorized engineering for, is going to need to actually have work done. The Dodge property needs work. There's an engineering report, or an assessment anyway. 66 Main, as Dave said earlier, is going to need some work. Second House Barn in Montauk, and Brooks Park.
Second House Barn, it's not CPF.
What's that?
It's not CPF.
Oh, I apologize. Okay. Brooks Park was in the capital plan for 2026. I mentioned this earlier. Tom brought it up, and we did meet with some people from that committee, and I think that I would like to have a path forward. I know that this was originally purchased as open space, later designated as historic, and the town has gone back and forth on that for a while. To Tom's point about equal treatment, I agree that we always want to be fair in terms of how we treat different properties, different user groups. The issue for this particular property that has it's confounding for me is the location. David mentioned earlier vandalism that's been repaired. So I just want to make sure that when we invest money, CPF money or otherwise, that it's going to, we have a plan in place for that money to be used and used appropriately in a way that's going to last. So if we were to redo these structures and they're broken into, I don't know if we get anywhere there. And so that's where I'd like to see, I don't want to put any user group through too much trouble to come up with what their plan is, but I want to know that if we're investing on properties that are 800 feet back into the woods or whatever, that, do we have cameras there? Do we have electric? And it's a bigger, to me, the conversation on the Brooks property is a little bit different than, say, the Edwards House, for example, which is in the middle of an open field in a park. But my main point here is I want to,
just quickly on that, because I think it's really important to the overall understanding of the Brooks Parks concept is that is precisely what they're trying to protect, is an artist colony that was removed, that was invested in nature away from kind of main structures, and how that was a movement along with Pollock and Krasner in that period of time, which is now lost and diminishing. And you know, that's historically why it's had that significance. So just to give the context of the specific location.
No, I totally understand, and I really understand the passion on the people who are involved in the property and how much they care and why. It all makes sense. It's just then we have to square that with, you know, if it's open to the public, we then have to have parking spaces. We have to have access that meets our standards. There's planning elements that go into this. And I just want to understand that there's a long-term plan for how that can be used sort of effectively. It's safe and
as with all properties.
Of course,
yeah, absolutely,
of course.
Yeah, agree with
it's just trying to preserve sort of the natural setback feel. It makes it more vulnerable, I think, to certain types of vandalism or abuse. But my main point in saying this is just that we should come up with a plan, and specifically with the Property Management Committee, we've been talking about the various structures we have and trying to prioritize. They don't all have engineering plans, so we don't know exactly the cost of the work, but we're trying to analyze sort of what's needed, what's the most urgent, and I would like to get the town board sort of a list of all these things that are coming up so that we can spend some money in 2025 from that fund. Because if we don't spend the 10% that's set aside for restoration, my understanding is it doesn't roll over into the next year. And so just, I think, fiscal responsibility dictates not that we have to use that money for this if we figure, you know, purchases are better, but I want to make sure that we're in a position so that we know what type of maintenance or restoration need to take place, and we're at the ready to spend that money should the board choose. So I think a lot more to come on that. I just wanted to make you all aware that that was the focus of the Property Management Committee, and I think it's a really good focus and something that's become more and more important as we acquire more and more historic properties.
Thank you, Ian. So I just have a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One is, I think, Tom, at the last work session, you brought up what it would cost to bond for the new senior center. So first, let me just start with, in an effort to offset the costs for taxpayers, the town has and will continue to apply for New York State and congressional grants. And we're also going to continue to monitor and apply for grant fundings as programs are announced. Other potential sources of funding that are being considered include the Orsted funding, which was something that was supported during the Van Scoyoc administration, and private foundation grants and donations. But ultimately, the difference between the final construction cost and all the other sources of funding will be met through a municipal bond with a 30-year term. Early estimates suggest that if the full $28 million cost of construction was met through a 30-year municipal bond, the annual cost to a resident would be $30 per year for a house with a market value of $1.1 million, or as it states on the tax bill, an assessed value of $4,000. So for just $30 per year over 30 years, we're ensuring that older residents have a place to stay active, connected, and supported. Today, we have a resolution for a temporary paid parental leave policy. It was something that our CSEA president, Jim Bennett, addressed, and becoming a parent is one of life's most life-changing moments. No one should have to choose between their paycheck and time with their newborn or newly adopted child. That's why the town is introducing a temporary paid parental leave policy to give our employees the support they deserve when they need it most. With this policy, eligible employees will receive up to 8 weeks of fully paid, job-protected leave to bond with their child. This is not just about supporting our employees, it's about strengthening our entire community. When we take care of the people who keep our town running, our first responders, our maintenance crews, our office staff, and more, we can better serve our residents. A workplace that values families creates a more stable, experienced workforce, reducing turnover and ensuring the best possible services for taxpayers. So right now, this policy is being introduced on a temporary basis as we prepare for collective bargaining negotiations with our employee unions in 2026. The town is committed to having those discussions, but in the meantime, we're taking this important step because we believe supporting our employees means building a stronger East Hampton for everyone. I also want to touch base on, and I know Kate, you had said that Katie Casey was at the Wayne-Scott CAC, which was great, but I don't know if everyone's heard that the Housing Authority has issued a request for qualifications to select a developer for the Route 114 Community Housing Project, which will create up to 60 new rental units on the 6.5 acres at 776 and 780 Route 114 in Wayne-Scott. As you recall, this past summer, we had transferred that property to the Housing Authority so that they could develop this property. This is a first step in selecting a qualified development partner who will design, finance, and construct the project in collaboration with the East Hampton Housing Authority and the town. So I believe their press release and the dates, you okay?
Yeah, fine,
And
sorry.
the dates for the RFQ are on the East Hampton Housing Authority website, but we're excited that this project is moving forward. And lastly, I just wanted to touch base. I had mentioned that the East Hampton Sag Harbor CAC met last night. They had a discussion about the upcoming public hearing on Thursday for the gross floor area formula, and the CAC unanimously supports the formula, the 7% of the lot plus 1,500 square feet, and will be sending a letter to the clerk. I mentioned we talked about potholes. Everybody was going to bring their list, and then when we got there, it was all praise for the highway department for all the work they've been doing and keeping ahead of that. We also talked about the Long Lane Roundabout and waiting on Verizon. I know Steve Lynch has reached out to his contacts at Verizon, and the supervisor's office will be doing the same. The CAC discussed e-bikes on sidewalks, particularly in the North Main Street corridor. That still remains an issue, and they're recommending that signage be posted there. And there was also discussion about the Long Island Railroad waiting room in East Hampton Village. There were some inquiries regarding when the station is open, and we will be following up with the railroad. I'm also told that there's a sign that they're looking for a commercial tenant for that
It's been there for a
space.
while. That and Southampton also have
Yeah,
the same sign.
so that's happening.
Just one thing on that quickly, because they have the warming room at that train station, but they close it during the winter, which seems particularly
counterproductive, right?
Yeah. Is there any way to reach out?
Well, that's what we're trying to find out. I mentioned to some folks that use the South Fork Commuter Connection, and they say they've seen people in there, they've seen the lights on. So I don't know if there's set hours, and that's what we're trying, or is it like when the temperature gets certain,
Right,
below
exactly.
a certain, what's the process?
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be looking into.
Thank you.
All right, so that's my liaison report for today. So now we can move on to.
May I just say thank you for getting that feedback on the tax bill for the senior center, and I agree with you. I think when we're looking at what provisions that provides to the town, that cost that's a good investment in my mind.
Yeah, because it's the senior center plus the human services division also that doesn't have a home right now.
Right, and you
Separate
just,
trailer.
in your liaison report, listed all of the programs that they're doing and.
Yeah.
And what they're doing blood pressure monitoring. They're always at the health fair and they're giving out information. They're got a lot of classes going on and a lot more requests for classes with the Wellness 60 Plus. It's a very popular program. Okay, so first up, Tom, you have.
Thank you. Yes, I do. Budget resolution. Yep. This is 2025-348. Be it resolved, the town board hereby directs the budget office to make the following budget modification: to increase revenue budget lines, solid waste fees in the amount of $84,650, and increase the expenditure budget line in subtracted costs in the amount of $84,650.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm happy to offer Resolution 2025-349. This is routine appraiser Lawrence and Dimony Consulting Corporation for property located tax map 300-6-2-13.005. The appraisal shall not exceed $3,800.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. 350 is approve agreement with Peconic Land Trust for mowing of Stony Hill lands at work rate of $150 an hour, not to exceed $600.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
351 is John Osborne's Homestead Historical Designation after hearing. This is to amend the zoning code to designate John Osborne Homestead Historical Landmark. The property name is Osborne Street, and the location is 66 Wainscott Main Street. Tax map number 300-200-2-21.
Second in discussion.
Sure.
So I just want to say that I was appreciative of the memo that we received from John Jelnicki on this issue. And in reading the memo and listening to the presentation today, I support what we're doing right now. I agree with Kathy on being methodical. And I also would not want to put a designation that would, on this property currently, that would preclude us from water quality projects, which is one of the enabling missions of why we purchased this property. I think that's extremely important. Also, when we look at the layers of protection on CPF, doing a management plan, being able to come back on that third structure and potentially in the future, once we know what water quality projects will be needed on there, coming back with a property designation, I can vote in the affirmative on this resolution.
Okay, so David moved it, you seconded it, all in favor?
Aye.
Is that your last one, David?
That is,
Okay. Resolution 352 is to authorize employee reimbursement for Beyond Plastics Pollution course. Resolved that Megan Folks and Emily Klein shall be reimbursed for the registration fee at the cost of $100 each, with the total cost not to exceed $200.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 353 is a 2024 budget modification in the Planning Department. This is moving $1,689 from full-time salaries to outside professional.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 354, this is the increase, this is 2025 budget modification for the Community Housing Fund. This is to increase revenue budget line, real estate transfer tax in the amount of $1,345,000, and increase expenditure line for grants, community housing in the amount of $1,345,000. And also to move $1 million from rehabilitation of community housing and $1 million from construction of community housing, both those going to grants and community housing in the amount of $2 million.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 355 is to adopt the temporary paid parental leave policy. The town recognizes the importance of supporting employees as they welcome a new child into their family. This policy provides eligible employees up to 8 calendar weeks of job-protected paid leave following the birth of a newborn or the placement of a child with the employee through adoption. This policy shall run concurrently with any pregnancy-related leave an employee may be eligible for pursuant to the collective bargaining agreement, and the town board hereby adopts this policy effective immediately.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
356 is to authorize payment for prior year invoices for emergency responder products. This is in the amount of $5,803.83.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So that is what we have for resolutions. Do I have a motion to go into exec session?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to go into exec session for personnel, advice of counsel, contracts, litigation, and CPF.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and thank you, LTV.
Thank you all very much and have a great day.